get started. We call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. And we are going to start with roll call. Please, Tim.
Right, Aaron? Marsha, are you on yet?
Yeah, present. Sorry, was in meeting.
Boyle?
Present.
Evans Jackman?
Present.
Pick?
Here.
Alwerda?
Here.
Horniker?
Here.
Madison?
Here.
Moses?
Recording in progress.
Here.
Seeley?
Here.
Scholes?
Here.
Stormont? Here. Olam?
Here.
Tykeson?
Here.
Warden?
Here.
Wool?
Here.
Quorum is present.
All right, thank you, Tim. Before we take a motion to approve minutes, we want to welcome 3 new trustees. So, student trustee Ruby Wool, it's wonderful to have you part of this. Amy Tykeson, also wonderful to have you part of this, and Andy Stormont. Welcome to each of you. We're delighted that you are willing to serve. Appreciate it. So we need to approve minutes for multiple meetings. We had 3 committee meetings in June, full board meeting, July committee meeting, and August full board meeting. We'd like a motion to approve the minutes in mass.
So moved.
Any discussion? Need a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That was just delayed. That was in favor, I think, Marcia, correct?
Yes, aye.
Great, thank you. All right. So we now take public comment, and we have 1 signed up to my knowledge. And just so the person making the comment, just so you know, we have a standing rule that we listen to the public comment and we welcome it. We don't ask questions. We don't respond. So don't think we aren't listening, because we are. But that's our standard practice. So Emily Beatty, is Emily here?
Emily's joining remotely.
Meeting Emily right now.
Oh,
So did she hear what I had to say, Jennifer?
Let me double check. Emily, can you hear us?
I did hear, yes. Thank you.
And Emily, did you hear what I said about our standing rule about commenting?
Yes, I did hear. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, well, welcome. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. Well, yes, as you said, my name is Emily Beatty. I'm the VP of External Relations for the GTFF. I'm also a political science PhD student at University of Oregon. So first, I wanted to say thanks for allowing me to be here today. We at the GTFF wanted to address the Board of Trustees to highlight our current platform as we negotiate a new contract with the university. We believe there is a distinct lack of basic respect and dignity that is afforded to graduate employees at this university, which is degrading the UO's reputation as a top research public university. Also, my apologies, I need to take a sip of water. GEs at UO are critically underpaid, undervalued, and overworked. According to the MIT the cost of living in Eugene has increased dramatically since the last contract negotiation in 2019. So far, UO has offered a 4% increase in pay for the lowest paid graduate students and a 2% raise for everyone else. This roughly translates to an extra $60 a month, failing to address the massive difference in pay versus cost of living. At this moment, every single graduate employee at UO makes less than a living wage. Using information from the Department of Education and the American Association of Universities, Ben Mannix, a current physics GE, investigated where we stand among our peers. The results were clear. UO GEs are some of the lowest paid in the country. And for GEs, UO is not only our workplace, it is our school. Our working conditions are our learning conditions. When we struggle to make ends meet, we struggle to succeed academically. The problems listed above are having a distinct, palpable effect on the UO's graduate community and reputation as a competitive graduate school. While graduate program enrollment across the United States has increased by 9% since 2010, graduate enrollment at the UO has decreased by 4% in that same time period. The lack of competitive salary to study at our university pushes potential graduate students and researchers to other schools that invest in students' well-being in exchange for their dedication to valuable research. In addition, undergraduate enrollment at UO has hit high record enrollment over the last 3 academic years. GEs are the foundation of undergraduate studies at UO, where they lead a variety of labs and discussion sections, as well as leading a substantial number of courses. As class sizes rapidly grow and while GEs remain overworked and underpaid, what kind of education can these undergraduate students expect to receive? The GTFF is currently bargaining for an increase in wages to bring the UO to a competitive and livable salary to address each of these issues, alongside demands for more equitable workplace treatment. The raises we have asked for would be just sufficient enough to meet the rising cost of living, and the workplace protections we desire would make the UO a safe academic environment available to students across the world. This should be a top priority given the alarming results of UO's climate survey from 2022. The GTFF wants to make sure this university is want to be a place where our contributions to the university sections are reflected in our pay and our treatment as workers. GEs who are treated with dignity will do better jobs and add to the value and prestige of our university. In summary, we believe that the current bargaining cycle represents a pressing opportunity for this university. The UO must address the stagnation of GE wages and the accessibility of our workplace conditions. Otherwise, it admits to a blatant discounting of the value of GE labor. Our union, the GTFF, believes that GEs deserve dignity, and we hope you do too. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate your time. We have no other public comment this morning, but we have 3 standing reports. And first is our new ASUO president, Chloe Webster. So please join us, Chloe.
Hello, everyone. First and foremost, I would just like to say thank you so much for all of the board members who were able to join yesterday in a luncheon with some fellow ASUO officers. We really appreciate you taking the time to interact with students and get to meet our ASUO, but also I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a dialogue throughout the year in which we can come together in more partnership and bring other students to the table as well, beyond our ASUO officers too. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to more events like that. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Chloe Webster. I am a junior studying planning, public policy, and management, as well as being in the Honors College. And I'm also from Memphis, Tennessee, so I came a long way to be at the University of Oregon, but I'm so glad that I did. I am thrilled to be able to speak in front of you today as ASUO president and be able to represent so many different students. It's truly an honor, and I thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. Now, in this report, I'm just going to go over some of what this administration for the next year has been working on, is looking to for the next year, as well as general student comments we've been hearing during our work this summer. So first, a little bit about the 2023-2024 administration. Over this past summer, we onboarded over 20 individuals for our executive cabinet, and they have been put into different teams between finance and communications and student organizations and advocacy as well. And so in each of those realms, one of our primary goals is engagement. Now, engagement can be very broad, but whether we're meeting with students at weekly coffee hours, or we're hosting trainings on how they can get involved in state level advocacy, or we're hosting big events like the ASUO Street Fair, we really want to increase the amount of one-on-one, face-to-face interactions that we are having with the student body, because this is where we can direct them to the resources available to them, as well as get them involved into different initiatives on campus. So when interacting with students, we want to be able to point them in the direction of the resources that their fees and what ASUO funds are available to them, as well as pull them into the initiatives that they truly, really care about, and get them to testify on initiatives that they really care about, as well as join the work that ASUO is doing. It also really helps because we, as a student government, our primary goal is to gain the input of students, so then we can go into rooms like this and share those concerns and thoughts and ideas with y'all. And you can take that and know that we have listened to students and have really tried to reach a large, wide group of students on campus. So that being said, the summer can be difficult because we're not on campus, but through social media interactions with different local news outlets, as well as one-on-one meetings with a lot of different student organizations, the two primary areas of interest that students have been coming to us and asking questions about fall under the Peace Health, University District closure, as well as basic needs. Now, to start with Peace Health, I'm sure that a lot of you have been thinking about this, and for us, this is a really big concern because I know personally a lot of students who have relied on that location being a 2-minute drive from a friend or even walking into the emergency room. And now that drive is becoming a 10 to 15-minute commute, and relocating all the emergency services to River Bend will put a lot of barriers on students to reach those emergency services. Now, we have spoken with University Health Services, and we understand that there are solutions being put into place. We're really excited about their increased mental health crisis services that they're implementing this year. However, there are hours beyond the hours that University Health Services are open that need to be accounted for. And I know that a lot of students will be able to call ambulances, but there are barriers to that as well, not necessarily knowing will their insurance cover it? Are they in a safe situation where they can call an ambulance? And these concerns are something that we're trying to work through and understand, can we partner with a service like Duck Rides or something in which transportation can be met and we can get students to the care that they need quickly. Now, because of these emergency services closures, it is now more important than ever to emphasize harm reduction on University of Oregon's campus. With the recent passage and legalization of fentanyl test strips with House Bill 2395, we can distribute the resources that students need for saving their lives, especially as overdoses increase. ASUO is really looking to the university and looking to places on campus in which we can put those resources into the hands of students. So whether that be fentanyl test strips or Narcan, we want to be able to distribute that and save student lives, especially considering that the emergency services unit is closing. And we want to be able to prioritize student lives in this instance. So ASUO has been in communications with different student organizations on campus, as well as fraternity and sorority life, but really trying to figure out where we can put those resources in accessible places on campus. Now, the second area falls under basic needs. And basic needs did recently do a survey, and we do know that there are students who are facing housing insecurity, food insecurity, and ASU is doing our best to work with the basic needs program to figure out how those resources can be truly accessible to them. In the survey, in which 40% of the students who answered the survey said that they were food insecure, from that same pool, 76% knew about the food pantry that we have in partnership with Episcopal Campus Ministries, but only 13% actually used it. So why is that? What is the barrier there? Is it because it's off campus? Do we need something on campus? And where can we look to put that space so that it's accessible to students? Similarly, there are other basic needs issues that we could centralize and find a space to make it easy for students to get the help that they need. Now, these are all really challenging areas, and it can be hard to figure out solutions. However, we have been working and talking with different offices on campus and really trying to see where we can partner. And I really would just urge you to be thinking about these things and looking and seeing where you can be a voice in that challenging area as well. So moving on to more successes and things that we are really, really excited about. One, we have been in communication with the University of Oregon Portland campus and really pulling them into the ASUO resources. Their students pay half of the same fee that all of the University of Oregon students on the main Eugene campus pay, but no, don't necessarily meet the same rewards and benefits of those resources. So trying to tap them in to what's available to them, as well as working with the DEI office and putting together an ASUO diversity action plan, especially important following the affirmative action Supreme Court decision. Also, more on the fun side, in terms of campus culture and really building a positive experience on campus, we are looking to bring another headliner in the spring and a concert to campus, as well as bringing more food trucks on campus, uploading funds to them so students can receive free food and just have a really fun, positive campus experience as well. So as we move into the year, a lot of students would really love to be in more communication with y'all. And so we do coffee hours throughout the year, every week, once a week, and would love to set up a time for all of you to be able to join, or a separate event, perhaps during homecoming weekend, in which y'all would be able to come and interact with students beyond myself. And also, Street Fair is coming up October 11th through 13th, which is arguably one of the best times to be on campus, besides when it happens again in the spring. So I really, really hope that you would be able to join, and we would love to host you for that as well. So that is all I have for you today. I want to welcome any questions, if you have any as well.
Any questions for Chloe?
Chloe, thank you for engaging us, and we have enjoyed over the last at least 3 ASUO presidents that we've met with, their efforts to include us and have us be around during finals and hand out treats or do things like that. And it kind of seems like maybe we know our schedule for our quarterly meetings, and that might be a good time to be able to do more of those communications, because we love meeting with your group and with all the students on campus. I was curious about the food insecurity. I guess I can't remember what you called it when you put it out to the students. It was just a kind of an informational, anybody could answer if they were interested in putting input. How many students did respond to that? Because that's always I know it's been a concern for a long time, and that knowing that it's there and having so few students use it, I'm wondering how many students actually responded to that
survey in
survey.
particular.
Uh-huh.
I will say it was a lower amount. I don't know the exact amount, but for me, it's not a matter of the number, it's a matter that that need is there, and there are students who face it. So regardless of if it's 1,000 or 500 students, there are students who are still in need, and we should.
No, I agree. I was
addressing
just
it, but
curious as to what
I
our worry is.
I'm not sure the exact number.
And that is off campus, right? That where we offer the.
Yes, it's through Episcopal Campus Ministries, I believe, and it is in a church off campus. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions? I have one. You had a busy summer. You filled 20 positions, right, for your cabinet?
Yes.
Are there any not yet filled? Is there anything you have left to do before we get the school year underway?
Any open positions? No, but I mean, there's always work that we're doing. So I would say that in terms of preparing for the school year, a lot of what we're doing is just waiting for students to get back on campus. And also, we're tabling at the flock party, which is when all the first year students come and we can interact with them. So really focusing on the welcome back and how we can welcome students to campus and let them know that ASUO is here and has the resources available to them.
Thanks, Chloe. Appreciate you being here.
And I just want to add my warm thanks to Chloe, Finn, the ASUO team. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to working together this coming year. It's going to be great, and they've been incredibly welcoming
Thank you
to
so
me.
much.
So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here today.
Good. Thanks. Our next standing report is from our University Senate President, Gerard Sandoval. Welcome, Gerard. Last time we met, we were having lunch together.
Yes, we were.
You're looking good. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, definitely. And I brought the entire team today. Okay, so good morning, Chair Roberta and Vice Chair Aaron, and other members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Gerard Sandoval. I am the president of the University of Oregon Senate, and I'm also a professor in the Department of Planning, Public Policy, and Management, which the student president is also a major of, so we're kind of a powerhouse at the university. I wanted to start off first by saying that with President Schultz, we've really met maybe like 5 or 6 times already during the summer. So we've created a pretty good working and collaborative relationship. So I really wanted the board to know that he's reaching out, and it's really important for the Senate to have a good relationship with administrators. So I think that's really key. The second, well, I want to talk about the priorities that we have for the Senate this year. And the first priority really deals with the post-affirmative action issues. Of course, we're really concerned about that, about losing students of color in particular. But I know that administrators are already working on that issue. Kevin Reed and Yvette are going to give you a briefing later on, so I'm not going to get into the specifics of that. But what I will say is that in Mr. Reed's committee, this post-affirmative action committee, we already have Senate representation in that committee. So I think that's kind of one of the key roles that the Senate plays, is that we need to have representation in different aspects of the university in terms of shared governance and so forth. So I think that's really important. The second priority has to do with the retention of faculty of color. We have a crisis at the University of Oregon in terms of retaining faculty of color. And CODAC, which is the Center for Diversity and Community, did a study, a 2-year study, where we interviewed about 40 faculty of color. These interviews were done by outside consultants, so they could be pretty objective. And really the findings were that faculty of color are really in a tough position. They're very, there's a lot of cultural taxation happening at the university, which basically means the added work that faculty of color have to do that is not compensated, that is usually invisible, usually doesn't fall in a committee or in a task force. They feel a lot of tokenism. So it's really the report, and I could share that report with you. It was a pretty eye-opening and shocking report. In fact, I wanted to share a couple of quotes from that report from faculty of color. So the first one was, this faculty of color was told to strengthen my hair to look more professional. Said, we are the old plantation workers, and they, administrators, bring new workers, and they are left, and then they leave within a few years, which speaks to really like the revolving door that is happening at the university when it comes to faculty of color. So they'll stay for a few years, and then they'll leave. We become a negative historical memory. We are not validated as part of the institutional memory, and it's a huge amount of labor that goes unrecognized. I'm reminded of how much trauma there is, how much trauma is in my body when there is tension with the administration. It's a range of experience felt throughout my body. And lastly, it's unfair to ask faculty of color to educate administrators of the history of anti-blackness at the university, and that happens a lot. Every time you get a new administrator, you have to kind of really relieve all that trauma. And so what we're going to do with the Senate is we're going to try to find ways where the Senate's work can really align with ameliorating some of these issues. The report was presented to the Senate last year, and we got a lot of support from the senators. And so one example could be a way to kind of streamline any courses or programs the faculty of color are really want to initiate, and that's something that falls within the Senate's purview. So that's just one example. We're going to try to engage in other ways. We also have actually another report that was done by Kodak that talks about the best practices and recommendations for actively retaining faculty of color. So if you're interested in that, I can share that with you as well. There's a lot of good information there. Another priority is our task force on service. So I've talked about this before. We've had this task force going on for 2 years. We finished the report, and really the report demonstrates the inequality of service that happens to faculty at the university. And the idea for this year is to form a task force of senators, administrators, and also union representatives so that we can take the ideas that came out of that report and actually try to start implementing them. There's some very concrete ways of measuring faculty, service of faculty. And we have different examples from different universities, like University of Maryland and so forth. Some are very qualitative, and others are a lot more quantitative. So we're going to start to see what are like the best practices there. And then lastly, the final priority is we really want to rebuild the UO's relationship with the Interinstitutional Faculty Senate. We haven't had a really strong relationship with them for the last 3 or 4 years, and they're actually a pretty important body. And so if you're not familiar with them, they're each public university in Oregon has a Senate, and so they all belong to the Senate. So I've gone to about 3 of their meetings last year. Usually the president briefs us, the provost of that university, and then the head administrator of the HEC. And so last year there were some issues with community college transfers protocols. And so they got really involved in that. We really advocated around those issues. So I think could be a pretty influential body in terms of advocacy. And so that's the priority we really want to kind of start pushing. And lastly, this is a fun thing. Today we're getting a tour of the new Portland campus. And so hopefully that'll give us some good ideas on how we can best integrate that campus into the Senate. So, and now I want to turn it over to my colleague, who's the vice president, Alison Schmitzky.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm honored to join the Senate leadership team as Senate Vice President. I feel like what I bring to this team is expertise in thinking about teaching curriculum, particularly with undergraduates, as well as in ways that the Senate can create processes that support the academic excellence in the classes that we offer. In particular, I feel like I was the nomination to become Senate VP, that now I'm laughing that there was coffee involved, not just a conversation. No, it's a pleasure. But I think that ask came from being the chair of the task force that led the course approval process. And I just really want to speak to that because I feel like in terms of why I accepted this nomination in this position was that I feel like that was the best of the Senate in terms of thinking about the work and the deliberation and the the effort to think about and pull from different places across campus to come together. So what you might see as being, oh, we got it through, that was hours of work, of good work, of faculty coming together and really thinking about the way in which we can support the innovation of our colleagues and support their expertise, thinking about the way in which those processes can be clear and structured so that people know the rules when they submit their work and they know the way in which the discussion will occur and how decisions will be made, all in an effort to think about the way in which those processes support the priorities that President Sandoval talked about, particularly when thinking about recruiting faculty of color, as well as creating programs that attract students and faculty of color to the university we're in. So I'm really excited to support the priorities that President Sandoval laid out in terms of thinking about what leadership I can provide to move those things to actionable items. I tend to lead that way. I really want to turn things into action. I also am really, again, I feel like I lead my work at the university in terms of my responsibilities of teaching and administration with students at my heart. And that's how I've come to all my Senate work, is really thinking about student experience in our classrooms and the way in which the Senate's purview over academic programming, what we can do in that body to support those experiences of students and our faculty who are doing good work. So I'm really pleased to be here and look forward to more exchange as we go along.
Yeah, and no, that was great. And finally, we have Sandy, who's our secretary, and he's really the one that kind of drives everything in the Senate.
Thank you, Gerard. My name is Sandy Weintraub. I am the Senate Secretary and also an advisor to the President. And Gerard asked me today just to give a little bit of a brief overview of what we do and who we are, because we are pretty unique and we want to be a partner. And you're going to hear the term shared governance because we are a key factor in that shared governance. And the reason that my position exists is because the President's office, in coordination with the Senate a couple years ago, really wanted to professionalize and better institutionalize this organization to make sure that our focus was being the shared governance partner that represents faculty, students, and staff, that we can work along with senior administration and along with the board to ensure that our governance practices, that all the work we do are at the highest standard. So incredibly grateful to the President's office for stepping up to help fund this position. I've been in it for a year right now, and it's going really well. And just to kind of give you an opportunity to explain what we do. One thing is we are quite unique. A lot of people refer to us as the Faculty Senate, and we do serve that role. We are not a Faculty Senate. We are actually the University Senate, and that's because we have voting membership that is the majority faculty, but also includes research faculty, staff from all categories, including classified and our Office of Administration, as well as student seats that are all voting seats. So that is unique. A lot of universities have separate organizations that cover those within their formal shared governance, and even a larger majority have a faculty senate that handles that authority that comes from being the overall statutory faculty. Here, that governance comes from the University Senate, which is more of a collaboration, which I think works really well. We get a lot of perspectives that come from the various constituencies that represent our university, and we like to include all of those constituencies in the decision-making process. Where our authority comes from, it's actually documents that you're going to be updating later today. You'll see that certain authorities belong to the faculty in consultation, of course, with the president and the board. But to lead it, there's a statement that's actually in the University Constitution, which is part of that delegation of authority, which talks about academic matters as commonly understood in higher education. Now, that's a hard one to define, but we like to see that as a positive. We like to see that we can impact and provide expert insight into all the different areas that affect the academic principles of the university. And we take great care in making sure that we're doing our work carefully to review things like, so for example, one of the biggest jobs we have is to approve new programs, new majors, new schools that are approved at our university. We had the opportunity to do that work with the Balmer Institute last year, and we had a really thorough process to make sure that that faculty from all parts of the university, staff, students had the opportunity to give comments that I think, frankly, helped to improve that presentation when it eventually went to the board and then went to HEC, and now we have a successful program, and it's an example of ways that we can do that. How we do our business, first we have a leadership team, which is the folks up here, along with our support staff. We have a Senate Executive Committee that we have further formalized and made into a vetting process, to be honest, for all of the motions that come through the Senate. It gives the presenters an opportunity to really hone their message. And we intentionally place folks on the Senate Executive Committee who are going to ask difficult questions. And especially for new programs, especially for things that are going to have a tangible effect on students and faculty, those questions have led to, we've seen tangible changes in programs. And we've started this process where we actually do ask a presenter that has a motion to actually come in front of the Senate, including exec 3 times. It may seem like a lot, but we have seen a lot of improvement. It does professionalize the whole process, and we make sure that when a academic program comes through the Senate, we are pretty confident that it's been vetted through our committee process first, then through the Senate in a way that it's not going to have an issue going through HEC, and it's going to be something that's going to serve as something the university can be proud of. We do our main work through our committee structure, and that includes a wide variety of core committees, including the Academic Council, which is made up of the chairs of all the core academic committees and would actually come into play in case of a university academic disruption. That group actually would take authority in setting things like grading policies and setting things like timing for various academic deadlines. And it came into play a lot during the pandemic, got a lot, and it showed the strength of our committee process. And we've seen how important that was and have taken steps to ensure that we continue to professionalize that process moving forward. We also have groups that deal with core functions of undergraduate and graduate work, and also some day-to-day things. Our committees include the Faculty Personnel Committee, which looks at matters of promotion and tenure, and the Academic Review Committee and the Scholastic Review Committee, which is actually the committees that review petitions about whether a student is able to continue in school if they're close to disqualification, or whether a student is able to petition around an academic rule that based off a circumstantial event in their life, things like that. So these are core day-to-day functions that also fall underneath the Senate. And it's all part of our focus on shared governance and also just our overall focus on making sure that we can be a partner. We have strengthened our partnership with the University President's Office and with the Provost's Office and have regular meetings. And over the last several years, those meetings have been very productive and provide an opportunity in a more informal matter to provide advice to both those offices from our larger constituencies. And that's been really successful. We also serve as a leadership pipeline, and that's been a really important thing. As Allison talked about, Allison's role as chairing one of our key task forces led to her role here, and we're always on the lookout for faculty who can be leaders on campus, to encourage them to become chairs of our key committees, to encourage them to become leaders at the Senate. And it's a role that we embrace, and it's one that, especially with my role when I was given the position, was to really always be on the lookout for faculty and staff on campus who can be leaders and put them in, help them get that experience, be in positions where they can affect the campus. We also strive to be an efficient environment for things like program approval, for any rules and policy processes that are coming through that affect the university. And the biggest piece, and I'll leave you with this, is we have a commitment to working on what matters. And I think that what you hear from folks around the country in terms of the various related organizations, Faculty Senate, is that you'll see that some groups focus on resolutions about political issues or about other things. And we really do strive to ensure that our goal is to be that shared partner along with the senior administration, along with the board, to make sure that this university can thrive and can operate smoothly. And that is our focus. I'm really proud of the professionalization and the building of the institution that's happened within the 5 or so years that I've been involved with the Senate. We continue to have great leaders coming up, and we're really proud of our work. And thank you so much for inviting us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also add that Sandy's a lawyer, and I've never had a lawyer work for me, and it's like the best thing in the world.
No, Kevin, no. He didn't say all lawyers are the best thing in the world.
That's good.
If you have any
Yeah.
questions.
Any questions from trustees?
I have a question. Now that you have this Kodak report, other than sharing this moment with us, is there a next step for that information?
Yeah, definitely. We developed this best practices and recommendations report. We've shared that with some of the administrators, especially with the Provost's office. But what we want to do is we want to also create some workshops that are based on these recommendations, especially for the unit level, unit level and also the deans, so that they're aware. I mean, ultimately, it's really at the unit level and at the college level where that inclusive climate really needs to be created. And so we're gonna do workshops based on these practices for that, and we're gonna keep on searching for some funding so that we can um, create an environment where faculty of color feel comfortable at the university.
Does this integrate with the climate survey results at all, or is this entirely separate?
That's a good question. So it's it's interesting because initially they were separated, and as the climate survey kind of progressed, um, they kind of started to kind of intertwine. And this is more of a qualitative effort, whereas the climate survey was more of a quantitative effort. But I think you could see some key parallels there in terms of how faculty of color feel about working at the university.
Kind of quick question, Mr. Chair. Would love to hear more about the Interinstitutional Faculty Senate and their work with the HEC, and just trying to get an understanding of if they're sort of at the table with the community college faculty. Are they more the final decision maker? Are we bringing in other states and best practices and to figure out how we get to a place where we have more 2+2 opportunities for students? Just would love to hear a little bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, ideally, it would be that, but it's not. It's not that now. In fact, it's been a bit kind of dormant for the last few years. So what it is now is the different universities getting together, sharing information, getting briefings from different administrators, and having direct access to HEC. Having representatives in different committees that are trying to align the community colleges curriculum to the university's curriculum. And I think its most important function is its advocacy in terms of being, for example, during the last meeting, we drafted a letter to the HEC talking about the difficulties that we saw in terms of the HEC having the final say in terms of what the curriculum, what courses we're going to count or not count at that level. Because we felt that kind of went beyond the faculty's responsibilities of creating the curriculum. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just have one. Hey, Gerard, how are you?
Oh,
With the Kodak report, was that shared with faculty and
So
the
yeah, it was
results?
a very sensitive kind of process. That's why it took 2 years. Initially, a lot of these interviews were very painful for faculty of color to go through, and they also wanted it to be anonymous, and that's why we hired outside consultants that were experts in their field. But once the report was written, then it was shared with the faculty that were interviewed. And then we got feedback from them. And then we've kind of finalized the report. So.
Is there a plan to release it out to the campus or to at least the faculty?
That's the plan, yes. Yeah, so moving forward, I mean, initially I wanted to kind of bring it here and then bring it, expand it. It's expand it in terms of the campus and so forth.
I would be interested in.
Yeah, and it's not just. I think the report could be useful for other universities as well, because I mean, there, universities around the country are experiencing similar things, right? And so this could be something that could be useful for them as well.
Did they do this at other universities? Or
not. We actually did a pretty extensive literature review on this, and there are best practices, but we didn't find any deep dive into what the perceptions of faculty of color were at those universities. Maybe there's 3 books that talk about the experience of faculty of color.
This isn't something they perform across universities across the country, or
no. Okay. This is just internal to the U of O, and right now we want to keep it internal to the U of O. and then we'll see where that goes.
Thank you.
Really appreciated the three of you coming, and you seem to be a wonderful team. Great organizations focus on function, doing what you do well, and culture, having people enjoy being there. And listening, Gerard, to your priorities really focused on the importance of culture, trying to make us a tighter unit when you talked about affirmative action, retention of faculty of color, rebuilding a relationship with institutional faculty senate. And then Allison, listening to you was more about function and your background and focusing on how we deliver to our students and the faculty. And then Sandy, you're an attorney, so winner, chicken dinner. Anyway, we appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I think you should just sit right there. I think you should sit right there. I'm assuming you can be seen well enough. So our third standing report is from our president, Carl Schultz. And as an introduction, there were really three things that stood out to us when we hired you. First were your personal characteristics. You are an active listener. You are open and curious. You're very engaging. Your personality, you're just an engaging person, and you're positive. It's like the glass is always half full, even when you identify the challenges that we have at times. And we also appreciate that you like specifics, backing up claims, and that was important to us. The second thing was your experience. It's almost as if you're groomed for this job. You'd been at the University of Wisconsin for a long time, and you were the dean of what is called there the College of Arts and Letters?
Letters and Science.
There we go, Letters and Science, which happened to be the same size as the University of Oregon. And then you were the provost. You got a whole nother perspective of what's important at a university. And the third is your belief in excellence. You came here to continue to make us better. And all three of those really impacted our decision in being delighted to hire you as the president of the University of Oregon. So welcome.
Well, thank you, Steve. I didn't anticipate that, so thank you for your generosity, and to the trustees. I also want to express my appreciation for Chloe Webster, our ASUO president, to Gerard Sandoval and Allison and Sandy from the University Senate president, who just delivered their reports. I look forward to working with all of you, with ASUO, with the University Senate, with the trustees and others to advance the university for our students, staff, and stakeholders. It's a tremendous honor to get to deliver my first president's report to the Board of Trustees. And I'm going to address 4 issues this morning. First, my first 10 weeks. Second, university strategic priority setting. Third, a topic that nobody's interested in, but I'll soldier on, conference realignment. And fourth, a brief update on leadership hiring. So for the first 10 weeks, I've enjoyed an awesome 10 weeks as president. Next topic. Some of my activities include the opportunity to hold several campus meet and greet events, attend the Oregon Bach Festival, amazing, USA Track and Field Championships, host state and federal legislators, host our Fairmont neighbors, meet leaders of Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes, attend Fiesta Mexicana in Woodburn, visit with Association of American University Presidents in Washington, D.C., and visit stakeholders in Colorado and Northern California. Equally important, my leadership colleagues have been particularly gracious in adapting to a new president while we work together to build culture and processes to advance the university. I'd also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the contributions of Mike Schill and Patrick Phillips. I inherit a university that's in very good shape, and of course, many others. We discussed some of my aspirations and goals with the board yesterday, so thank you, trustees, for the feedback, and I'm excited to work with you on propelling the UO forward. As I've stated in many of my remarks since arriving on campus, I like the metaphor of the North Star to describe institutional goals. As Steve hinted at, great organizations don't just happen. They're built from clarity of purpose and a shared understanding of the priorities that permeate throughout all levels of the organization. So as I continue to listen and learn, we'll be embarking on a process together to engage in discussions and define the university's North Star or stars for the years ahead. This process will involve 2 engagement phases over this academic year. Phase 1 will include many discussions using existing structures like staff meetings and with representative bodies like the University Senate, like ASUO, like you as trustees and others, as well as multiple stakeholder sessions and a web-based survey for members of our community. To catalyze discussions during phase 1, I'll present what I see as a set of focused opportunities for the UO. And from those, I hope the entire UO community will engage and share their thoughts, ideas, and hopes for the future. We will do our best to focus these discussions on concrete actions and measurable outcomes and not just talk. And then in phase 2, we will gather those sets of priorities and goals in a draft and then get focused reaction to those. I speak a lot and believe deeply in the importance of alignment. For the university to best meet our mission, we need clear and sensible goals. Ideally, all levels of the university will be aligned with those goals, and these goals will be sufficiently concrete to drive action going forward. So I look forward to continuing our discussions this fall and to celebrating what we've learned together later in the spring. Now, we'll begin these conversations by soliciting feedback around 5 initial focused areas. These are to improve 4- and 6-year graduation rates. How can we raise them and enhance the quality of the student experience? Now, we had one member of our leadership team who said, Carl, that seems awfully specific, awfully focused. That member of leadership team is now gone. Actually, he is gone, but he was only serving in a temporary capacity until Joe Buck started. So I've outed that member, and we laugh about it. But being a little bit more serious, graduation rates are a great summary statistic to the overall quality of the undergraduate student experience, right? Because to have the graduation rates we want to have, we have to have outstanding mental health services. We have to have emergency financial assistance because one of the big reasons students will leave because of financial exigencies. We have to have first-rate advising. We have to have a curriculum that's delivered not at 11 and 1 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but across the whole range of times that students need to take courses. And so graduation rates, while again seeming quite specific, encompasses a lot of what we want to do. Second, I want the University of Oregon to be a leader among the nation's great public research universities in career preparation. We want to launch our graduates who have earned a great University of Oregon degree to make a good living and to lead a good life. That has other collateral benefits because by being a leader in career services, that means we will have leveraged one of the single most important things that University of Oregon has relative to our elite private institution peers, and that is our scale. When we are able to leverage the talents of our recent Duck graduates who are in positions to hire interns and new employees, we will then be leveraging the awesome, mighty Duck Nation. Moreover, these career aspirations may be one of my most and one of our collective most important EDIB programs, because by having first-rate career services, we can recreate the privilege that the Schultz daughters have by accident of birth and allow all of our students to make an effective transition from college into their next steps. I want to enhance the effectiveness of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work as we seek to build a culture where all feel a deep sense of, one of my favorite words, belonging, where everybody feels they have a place and belong on campus. And from that platform, we can create what we will call, I think, my marketing folks haven't weighed in yet, but a campus of flourishing where everybody can reach, staff, students, and faculty can reach their full potential. Fourth, we'll work to further foster a culture of research and teaching excellence, building on areas of Oregon's strengths and distinction. These presumably include, among other things, the Oregon Bach Festival, the Oregon Hazards Lab, where we're helping to detect earthquake, fires, and volcanoes across the Cascades in the western United States, as well as our great accomplishments in neuroscience and leveraging the groundbreaking work of the Knight Campus for Accelerating Scientific Impact and the Balmer Institute for Children's Behavioral Health. And fifth, I want to leverage the reputation of entrepreneurialism, innovation, and success of Oregon's athletic program to elevate the entire university. We've made an important step toward realizing that last area of focus when we joined the Big Ten and when we will join the Big Ten next August, in August 2024. Before I discuss this move, let me note, as human beings, we're capable of simultaneously holding more than one feeling. I'm enormously excited, as I'll describe momentarily, about the future for the University of Oregon and our ability to drive prosperity in the state, in no small part through this change in conferences. Joining the Big Ten Conference will provide us with an even greater platform for leveraging the excellence and brand of Oregon athletics. At the same time, I have great sympathy for their challenges our peers at Oregon State are navigating. I support and want to see the Beavers be successful. My team and I continue to be ready and willing to talk to our colleagues at OSU and WSU about solutions for a stable future for us all. Now, some are deploring Oregon's move to the Big Ten by saying we have chosen money over mission. That is simply not true. The University of Oregon is a nonprofit institution, and like all nonprofits, we are focused on our mission. That mission is to provide life-changing experiences for our students, to expand the boundaries of knowledge and engage in curiosity-driven research, and to serve the state and beyond as engineering of economic prosperity. So to understand our conference move, let me explain it with 5 key words. The first, stability. This period of realignment started in 2021 with Oklahoma and Texas announcing their plans to jump to the SEC. It continued in June 2022 when UCLA and USC announced their plans to leave the Pac-12. In July of this year, before a TV deal was on the table, the University of Colorado announced their intention to join the Big 12. There is an upheaval occurring. We could wish for things to stay the same, but they aren't. Our move will join the University of Oregon with the premier athletic academic conference in the country. That move maintains stability. The second word, visibility. For us to be able to deliver on our mission for years to come, it is critical that we are a university that has a strong national reputation. Absent this move to the Big Ten, Oregon sports would only be available by buying an extra package on Apple TV. We will be available on linear or conventional TV to many, many, many more alumni, prospective students, and other Duck fans. This will be important for recruiting students and faculty and to the university's overall reputation. Words 3 and 4, academic excellence. The Big Ten has many industry-leading cooperative agreements that expand access for our students and faculty to scholarly resources, research connections, and classroom opportunities, to just name a few. The Big Collection pools resources across Big Ten libraries. So not every library has to have deep collections in every area imaginable of human inquiry. Course Share splits the teaching of less commonly taught languages, deepening language instruction across member institutions. The University of Oregon no longer needs to have a 4-semester sequence in Urdu or Quechua or every language imaginable in the world. We can split those responsibilities with our partners across the Big Ten. The Big Ten Academic Leadership Program provides valuable training for department chairs, deans, and emerging campus leaders. It's one of the best programs of its kind. In the vice presidents, almost every one of my vice presidents meets several times a year under the auspices of the Big Ten Academic Alliance to share best practice. The fifth word, and I'd be putting my head in the sand if I didn't admit that resources do matter. So my fifth word is resources. They do matter. They matter in the following way. The UO is one of only 25 universities in the country and the only one in our state where neither tuition dollars nor general funds from the state are spent on athletics. Our move to the Big Ten will make it considerably more likely that we will be able to maintain this boundary. Oregon athletics pays its own way and supports a broad array of women's and men's sports at the highest level of competition. We're very proud of that. I also want to thank my board colleagues for supporting the decision to move to the Big Ten. I know you did not make this decision lightly, and you knew it would not be popular with everybody. But you understood this decision was about what was doing right for our students at the UO, to ensure you can keep the athletic program self-funded so student tuition and fees can support academics and not athletics. You hired me to take actions that place the university in the strongest possible position 5 years and 10 years from now in order to do the best to serve our students in the great state of Oregon. For the reasons I'm given, I'm confident that we have done the right thing. So in closing, foundational to our success is a strong leadership team. I'm pleased to be welcoming our new Vice President for Advancement, Joe Buck, who will begin his position later this month. The search for a new Vice President for Communications is ongoing. We continue to review candidates as applications to come in. Jane Gordon is kind enough to chair that search. Jane, thank you. I'm optimistic that we will recruit a dynamic and experienced leader for this role. I also intend to launch a search for a permanent provost this fall. As you know, Janet Woodruff Borden has been serving in this role with a commitment and dedication for a full year. I'm grateful, deeply grateful for her leadership, counsel, and wisdom. She's been a terrific colleague. This search does not mean that we will slow any of the important work going on in the provost's office under Janet's leadership. Indeed, Janet is committed and pushing forward every hour of every day. All right, I want to thank the many, many people who've helped to make this transition into this position extremely positive. I'm grateful to them and to you, the board, for your guidance and grace. I'm enormously excited for the start of the fall term, although we start too darn late in the fall, in the return of more students and faculty that the new academic year brings. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, Carl. Questions? I'll start with one. Simple one. You talked about new hires, and you mentioned Joe Buck, and you announced the hiring of permanent provost. There are a couple other positions to fill everything out. What are those?
Yeah, great question. So we're right in the process of a communications search. So people will be coming to campus. I'm knocking on wood when I say that, but I hope in the next few weeks. Then the next search will be for provost. We will commence that very soon. Following up on that, we will be searching for a vice president for student affairs. Start kind of pushing on that search, possibly late fall, certainly no later than January. Along with that, there will be 2 dean searches. That is a permanent dean for the Clark Honors College and a permanent dean for the Lundquist College of Business. Those will also likely commence in late fall. So lots of activity in the world of search.
Good. Yes, Jenny.
Just a quick question. I appreciated your rundown of the programs offered academically through the Big Ten. Is it fair to say that the Pac-12 does not have comparable academic programs?
Yeah, so the Pac-12 is a terrific conference. It's been a great home for the University of Oregon, but I don't want to say negative about the Pac-12, but I can say there is nothing like what we see in the Big Ten. The Big Ten Academic Alliance is, I believe, unique in the country. I know other entities have tried to create similar activities and for whatever reason have not been able to make it stick. But one of the things I want to mention in the new things like the big collection and the academic leadership program and and course share, the less commonly taught languages, it doesn't mean that we're diminishing the other collaborations we have with some of our one-on-one partners in the Pac-12. And so we'll keep the collaborations that have made us so strong, but then expand the opportunities that our move to the Big Ten provides us.
All right. Thank you very much, Carl. Yeah. Okay. Next up on our agenda, Vice President, General Counsel. Oh, I skipped one. Well, let's pass something first. Sorry, Kevin. So we have 2 pending committee actions that we need to approve. There were 4 coming into this. We've chosen to defer the policy on retention delegation to December and the audit approval because we weren't able to have that presentation yesterday. So there are 2, and I'd like to have a motion to approve both of them. One is the bylaw amendment approval, and the second is the student conduct code change approval. Is there a motion?
Moved. Second.
Second. Any discussion beyond what we did yesterday? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion's passed. Thank you. Now, we will move on, and we have Vice President General Counsel Kevin Reed, and also Yvette Alex Senso. Sorry, Yvette. Vice President for Equity and Inclusion. I believe Yvette is remote.
That's correct.
Do we have her on?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the topic is the Supreme Court activity and enrollment.
Thank you. Really delighted to have the opportunity to address the trustees with respect to this very important development in higher education in the Supreme Court. I'm going to see if my slides are up. Yes, they are. I'm even more delighted that Yvette, Dr. Alex Asenso, has agreed to partner with me in this work and in this communication. To tee it up, and I'll put the agenda on there. When the case was still pending, then Interim President Jamie Moffett asked me to chair a working group to anticipate the decision and understand how the university might have to adjust to it. It was critically important to me that that work not be seen as the attorney running around telling everybody what they can no longer do based on what the Supreme Court has said. Rather, it's really important to me that this be an effort perceived as how the university is going to continue to work on its important obligations to achieve diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, within the constraints of the law, obviously, but in a way that does not cause us to break stride. Other institutions, other states have taken a different tact. If you read the Chronicle of Higher Education or frankly, New York Times, Washington Post, you'll see that states of Kentucky, states of Missouri, other institutions have said, no, stop doing this, stop doing that. We are constrained from being able to achieve our objectives, and that is not the position that the University of Oregon is taking. Obviously, we're being cautious and being clear that we are going to be compliant with the law, as the Supreme Court has stated it. But I want to make it very clear that what we are doing is trying to analyze what the decision says and not read into it that which it does not say as we do our work going forward. Yvette, I invite you to add your words as well.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Wonderful. So good morning, board members, and thank you, Kevin, for the invitation to present today, and good morning, President Schultz. Great institutions live out their values, and so we began this presentation, as Kevin mentioned, with an understanding of what the University of Oregon values are and how those values not only inform our work with this particular Supreme Court decision, but our work from day to day. As you can see from the slide, just a recitation of our values, several important ones. For example, when Chloe presented her sort of agenda for the ASUO, she did so with passion. So did Gerard, as he listed aspirations. It's a value of the University of Oregon to support that kind of work, not only among our students and our faculty and staff. As you can see, academic freedom is extremely important to us at the university. We love and admire and want to hold dear to the culture of the University of Oregon and the identity that shapes this university. And of course, we're especially important and it's especially important to steward our resources in a sustainable and responsible way. Among the values you see, however, in addition to those, is this notion of diversity and the focus on equity and inclusion. At the University of Oregon, we are especially concerned about the historical groups that have been marginalized for a variety of reasons. But we define diversity very broadly to include, but not limited to, ideology, religion, race, gender, geography, ability, socioeconomic class. And so as we think about the work that is going on, right, with our response to this, these values are guiding the way. Next slide, please. It's also important to think about the sort of context for the work that we do. And that context includes a demographic context for our students and our faculty that we'll talk about in a minute. But do know that our effort to be excellent, to be the best that we can be, not only in Oregon, but around the world, is truly contingent upon our ability to really exhaust the diversity of our students, faculty, staff, alumni, trustees, and institutional partners. And if you look at the demographic makeup of our students, you can see that while we are increasingly diverse, we still have lots of work to do. If we're thinking about the University of Oregon in terms of its national reputation, we want statistics that not only represent the state of Oregon, we want statistics that represent the nation and the world beyond. And you can see that with respect to our demographics, white students represent the majority of our students, followed by students who are of two or more races, followed by our Asian students and our Latino students. Those are the top four groups of students. Moving on to our employee sort of category, while we know the affirmative action or the race conscious admissions decision was focused on students, it's important to understand what our employee context looks like, because the research shows that it's important to have role models for which students can see themselves. And so we see here again, whites and Hispanic and Latino faculty members, Asians, and race unknown is sort of the broad context here. If we go to the next slide, we also see the sort of employee context looking at our tenure track faculty, our non-tenure track faculty, our officers of administration, and our classified staff. And we see that our officers of administration provide lots and lots of diversity among the different racial and ethnic groups. And then following, we look at gender, which is another group that has been historically marginalized in the United States. And we see But if we look at our employee pool and category there, again, thinking about the role models that our students see, the least diverse in terms of gender, our tenure track faculty. And we see, however, on a positive note, that our graduate student employees and our undergraduate students are increasingly diverse in terms of gender. Now turning it back over to Kevin for more information about the key principles and implications of the decision.
Sure. So the case that brought us into this conversation, Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard and UNC, been pending in the courts for several years. Decision came out from the Supreme Court in the last days of its term this last June. And I would say that when the decision came out, I and many of my colleagues who care about these issues sighed a bit of a sigh of relief. The court could have gone a whole lot further given the way the advocates in the court had pressed the court than they did. At the core of the issue was whether institutions of higher education, both public and private, may any longer use race overtly in an admissions process. Harvard was the example that they teed off on, where Harvard talked about an admissions process which initially screened applicants based on test scores and GPAs and other criteria, but then tried to do a balancing within an admitted class to determine whether they had the right balance that they were seeking in terms of racial or ethnicity in the composition of their class. I can tell you that the University of Oregon does none of that. We do have a relatively high admissions rate in comparison to Harvard. Everybody does in comparison to Harvard. So it is really in order to achieve the increasing diversity that Roger and his enrollment team have over the course of the last decade, it has not been necessary for them to engage in any race consciousness in their application or admission process. I want to correct the record because the Oregonian did, in fact, early on when the decision was released, claim that Oregon uses race in our admissions. We do not. We certainly do offer students an opportunity to present their full selves in our holistic admissions process. And in so doing, they often are describing how their race, ethnicity, and their background has influenced who they are as a person. The inspirations they've had, the challenges they may have had, the opportunities they may have had, that all factors into it. And so while the court did say that Harvard and UNC's process, which overtly put race as a factor in the admissions process, is no longer legal, again, that doesn't change our practices. To me, very importantly, was what the Supreme Court said in the closing paragraphs of the majority opinion, in which they made it clear, and this was responding to an issue that was quite hot in the oral argument in the case as to whether there was a strict color blindness that was required by the Constitution, such that no admissions office could consider in any way the race or ethnicity of a candidate for admission in college. And what the court said in answering that question was very helpful. And it said, nothing in this opinion should be construed as prohibiting universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected his or her life, be it through discrimination, inspiration, or otherwise. It's very important language for us because it does very much validate how our admissions team does look at race. If a candidate for admission describes how he or she was influenced and how they got to where they are in terms of their character, absolutely. They can not pretend that they come to the university without gender, without race, without ethnicity. I think that's critically important to our work going forward. I would say that other issues that were of concern to me as I was anticipating the decision is some of our efforts in supporting diversity, equity, and belonging. Would they be challenged? For example, our Black Cultural Center, our ability to run our academic resource support centers, the ARCs that we have for our students in marginalized groups, for example. The Supreme Court did not touch on those issues, and importantly, the United States Departments of Justice and Education have put out guidance in recent weeks that validate our continued use of those sorts of programs to support our students to be successful when they're at the University of Oregon. In addition, those agencies have supported and validated the use of our pipeline programs, the sorts of ways in which we do outreach to high schools where we know students who are going to bring diversity to our campus are there. What we always have to take care of, however, is just being careful, as the Supreme Court cautioned, that we are not simply shifting our focus and shifting it another criteria that we believe will drive diversity in order to avoid using race overtly. We don't do that now, and we will not need to do that in the future in order to continue the gains that we've made in increasing the diversity of our student population. I would say as well that we are not running the way some states have into reading things into the decision that have not yet been pronounced. The use of any sort of mention of race, for example, in financial aid. We don't have any race exclusive scholarship programs that we run as an institution. We obviously will not be doing that into the future. We saw that as being already prescribed by the United States Constitution. But we are obviously looking at what it means in terms of our institutional hiring practices, our ability, as Gerard mentioned very importantly, to recruit and retain underrepresented minority faculty and staff. We're looking at those issues carefully, but see no reason to make any major adjustments in how we are doing that work going forward. So in order for you to get the credit that Marceline Burke will award you after this lecture, I did want to just talk about affirmative action in higher education. It has been a fraught issue. It's been a political controversy, but it's been a legal controversy. Fractured decision in 1978 involving University of California, Davis Medical School. The Supreme Court validated the use of race in college admissions for a very specific criterion, that is for a university to achieve the sort of diversity that the university believes is important to the educational experience of its students. The court did reject at that time that you could use race as, you could justify the use of race to overcome societal discrimination. This is also where academic freedom plays in, and it's really important because what the Supreme Court did justify the use of race on was the institution's ability to define itself through its student body and its student body through its admission criteria. That's why I'm very grateful to Gerard for giving us on my committee a terrific member of the faculty to help be a voice in the room as we talk about how we adjust, if we do need to adjust at all, to the Supreme Court's decision. Because really it belongs to the university, not to the Supreme Court, not to the legislature, not to Congress, who gets to be a student at the University of Oregon. That decision in '78 got re-examined several times over the course of the decades that intervened, and the Supreme Court kept narrowly and more narrowly defining the uses of race in college admissions. Most recently, in 2016, it validated the use of race in University of Texas in its decisions, as long as it was narrowly tailored. And University of Oregon did take that decision, did its own analysis, making sure that we were in compliance with it. We were, continue to be. In the meantime, politics also played a role. A number of states in the country issued their own initiatives, propositions that forbade the use of race in college admissions. California was the first in 1996. Followed by the other states you can see on the screen over the years. I was at UCLA for 7 years before coming to U of O. I got very used to working within the so-called Proposition 209 arena, where we were very careful to address issues of diversity and to make advances in terms of admissions of especially African-American students, which had plummeted after Prop 209 passed, and made huge gains at UCLA compliant with the law in ways that I think acknowledge ways in which we can achieve diversity without needing to put race as an overt factor into our admissions processes. And I believe that what I read at its core out of the Supreme Court's decision is that we are now, Oregon, as all the other states that don't have propositions, are now effectively on the same playing field as those states that enacted those prohibitions against the overt use of race as a preference in an admissions process. And so that is our organizing principle going forward as we look at our policies. Turn it back over to Yvette to really talk about how we are trying to advance our efforts in that arena, again, in compliance with the law and knowing that people have us under a microscope. We did, within weeks of the Supreme Court's decision, got a letter from Stephen Miller and his new organization, Americans for Americans, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but threatening us if we ever mention race. Ed Blum, who founded SFFA and funded the litigation, sent us and 150 other institutions a letter giving us his interpretation, which I believe was largely exaggerated of what the decision that he paid for got him out of the Supreme Court. So we know that we are on radar screens. We know that we're under microscopes. So we're trying to be very cautious and not, at the same time, we are managing risks. We are not running from risks. We know that to do this work, we may have to take some risks. So, Yvette.
Thank you, Kevin. One of the blessings that we have at the University of Oregon is having Kevin, who is familiar with operating in the 209 environment. And it's important as an institution of higher learning, right, that we are in the business of educating. So our first defensive maneuver is to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what the holding says and what it does not say, and that folks understand the implication of these policies and programs. And hats off to the ASUO. Within days of his election, Finn was engaging with the diversity portfolio to get his own diversity plan together. And what he has been able to do as well is to help us in educating the student aspect of that portfolio. The second focus there is on recruitment and overall support of underserved communities. So President Schultz mentioned that he had been to Fiesta Mexicana. That's one of admissions many outreach programs to communities around the state of Oregon to encourage the University of Oregon as the destination of choice, especially focused on our Latino students. We also are importantly focused on university partnerships because financial aid is extremely important in making sure that our students who are underserved have opportunities to come to the University of Oregon. So making sure that we are educating donors and making sure that those kinds of partnerships continue to flourish is important. And finally, several folks also mentioned the kinds of programming that we have for students, some of the ARCs that Kevin mentioned earlier, the Longhouse, for example. All of those are important kinds of offensive mechanisms to make sure that the students that we have, we continue to retain, and we can even enroll and retain more students. Next slide. Are you taking this one, Kevin, or am I?
I think you are.
All right. So in terms of the important work, it's not only important to be on the offensive, right, but to defend ourselves against the encroachments and the possibility of loss. We began with an understanding of the context. And so we see larger numbers of students who are Asian and white and Latino, but we also see some flatlining and very minimal growth among historically marginalized Native students and African American students. And so we want to make sure that we're measuring the impact of this decision on the enrollment numbers and figuring out what we can do within the bounds of the law to ensure that we continue to grow diversity, because inclusive excellence at the University of Oregon, remember, depends on making sure that we are exhausting all possible avenues of diversity, race being an important aspect of that. Also understanding and updating our institutional strategy. So the president mentioned that we're going to be enriching the work that we're doing, and that strategy is important in helping and partnering with the general counsel in moving that work forward. Kevin's team has already done a great job of scanning and our procedures and our policies to ensure compliance with the law. And then also Roger's team, through the Office of Admissions, to realize that the college admissions profession is predominantly white. I think over 80% of all admissions officers are white. And so they have actually launched an effort to diversify the ways in which students become familiar with this work and are encouraged to do this work through an internship program at the University of Oregon, probably a model for the rest of the country. So these are just 4 of the defensive mechanisms that we are engaged in right now. And that list will continue to grow as we do this work. Back at you, Kevin.
Great. I did want to add one other thing, which is when I said we don't have race-conscious scholarship programs, we do have a very important program in home flight and in our residency for Native American members of Native American tribes. We are not breaking stride in those programs. It is my conclusion, and I'm joined by many of my colleagues, that when we are dealing with members of sovereign tribes, that we are dealing with citizens of sovereign nations, not individuals on the basis of race or ethnicity. So we believe that we are within a safe harbor in that. We have gotten a letter from somebody challenging us doing that. We are not. We're in the process of potentially responding to that, but we may be challenged on that. But I'm quite confident in our ability to defend. Questions?
Questions? Yes, Tim.
So could you just briefly describe the admission process? Student submits something and what happens then?
I will embarrass myself if I pretend to be Roger at this table. He is a national expert on these issues. He, in fact, acted as a consultant to the University of Texas when they were litigating these issues. What I would describe most importantly, because I can't give you all of the steps in the process, but what we do, which is very important to, is have a holistic admissions process. We don't just focus on test scores and GPAs. Interestingly, even though we don't, every year, as our classes get more diverse, our average GPAs go up as well, which is, I think, great testimony to the hard work of Roger's team. What it means is that you're looking at the whole student. You're looking at somebody within the context. And so a student, for example, who is going to a high school which is under-resourced, that has 4 AP courses, and she takes all 4 of those AP courses, in comparison to a candidate who may go to a well-resourced private school that offers 24 AP courses, and she only takes 4 AP courses. The team will generally give more credit to the student who showed the initiative, showed the grit, who really, poured herself into her studies and took advantage of all the opportunities she had at that school. And those are the ways in which they're just not looking at a GPA, adding it to a test score, and then declaring who gets to be a member of the freshman class.
But it's a team of people. What is it, 20 or 5 or?
It is somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple of dozen readers who will look at, are beginning the process of reading the applications as they come in, and will screen them with respect to those that are clearly admittable, those that are not, that may be on the bubble, that will get additional review by other teams. And it is a number of individuals that Roger and his admissions director selects and then trains in the process.
Any other questions? Yes.
Really appreciate this presentation, and thank you so much for laying it out so clearly. Dr. Asenso mentioned just looking at making sure the numbers for kids, particularly Black and Native kids, aren't staying flat, and so seeing those periodically would be important for us to just take a look at. And then just wondering if we could get a sense of offices or an office who's assigned to the offensive and defensive maneuvers, and then having an understanding of institutional resources dedicated to those, and the pre and post sort of check in on how things are going would be helpful to just hear a bit more about.
Well, I think you're looking at the 2 co-captains between me and Yvette. And while I'm probably primarily defense and she's primarily offense, I'd like to think that we are pretty much joined at the hip in all of those efforts. My team is meeting with folks in admissions, making sure that we are reviewing the training for the readers. Hoping I get invited, as members of my team have in the past, to the training sessions for the readers, to make sure that everybody is reading off the same page with respect to how to make sure that we don't misstep in that context. We are looking at going through the website, seeing how we are representing opportunities for scholarships and things of that nature, and offering guidance and advice with respect to how to present things in a way that might reduce risk. We're also waiting for guidance from some agencies out there, right? We have some federal grants, for example, in STEM that is targeting trying to increase representation of marginalized students in those fields. Well, those are dollars that come to us, that require certain things that are race conscious coming from the federal government. And until the feds tell us to stop, we're going to continue to comply with those grants.
And just adding
Yes.
on,
Yeah. Exactly. Yvette, yeah, I'd love to hear you.
yeah, just adding on in terms of one of the second offensive maneuvers, and an example of a partnership. So in terms of recruitment opportunities, the Office of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion works specifically with Roger's office on recruitment. And one of our assistant vice presidents is actually responsible for working in addition to Roger's office with advancement on some of the kinds of activities like Fiesta Mexicana, the Native American opportunities, African American opportunities that exist in the communities. So it's important to realize that the work does not only focus on students, but building the sort of ecosystem in which the relationships are created, and then making sure that there are opportunities for those relationships to continue to build and bud. And in terms of the kinds of doubling down on systemic efforts to retain students, the Center for Multicultural Academic Excellence, for example, is an organization that provides holistic advising for our students, and also partners with our colleagues at Lane Community College on transfer. And we know that a lot of diversity also comes into the university through the Transfer Community College program. So those are just two efforts and two sort of partnerships that exist to allow us to monitor and understand how these numbers may be growing or diminishing.
I did want to add that the working group that Jamie set up and asked me to lead continues its work. We are meeting regularly, and I neglected to thank Chloe for actually assigning Finn to be a member of that working group. So we've got ASUO representation as well as the Senate. Mark Schmeltz is participating, Krista from Grad Division, folks from Roger's shop as well. So we've got a good team that I think has covered the waterfront and looking for risks out there.
Other questions, Connie?
Mine was just more of a comment. I was excited to see on the offensive work, the recognition that states have lived in this world, especially California since 1996, and yet have found a way to live their values. And frankly, some of them national leaders. Well, I know at my home institution, we look to actually the UC Medical School, UC Davis Medical School as a national leader. So there are learnings there, and the decision doesn't mean that we can't continue to live our values.
Just to build on the comments, really helpful. Appreciate both of you sharing this information, especially highlighting what many folks might not be aware of in terms of the tribal government-to-government relationships and how that is not specific to just admissions, but to Carl, you highlighted you're engaging with the tribal governments earlier. So that's I think a really important point as we enter this world, is the unique nature of those relationships. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Dr. Alex Asenso, thank you for being here. Kevin Reed, thank you for being here and for the update. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break, so be back at 11:15, please. Going to
progress.
re-engage. We have 2 items left on our agenda this morning, and with us now is Eric Rodell and Rob Mullins. Rob is our Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, and Eric is our Deputy Athletic Director. Welcome, gentlemen. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you, Steve. Take off running with it?
Take off and run.
All right, we're good. Great to see everybody.
You
Appreciate
got all
you.
the blocking up front, you got a hole that.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, we're still hydrating from Lubbock, Texas. It's a little warm down there. But appreciate you making time for us to give an update here. We followed the slide restriction, so we'll be efficient with your time, but happy to take any questions that you have. Many of you have seen some of this stuff, but we'll just kind of start off by, over the last several years, kind of the overall theme for our department has been captured in these goals. And I'll say here, we are very fortunate, Eric and I, to work on a team of people who feel very connected to our mission of serving students, serving the state, and being a source of pride for our institution. But we kind of fall into these categories of, we focus on building a culture of excellence in everything that we do. If we do it, we want to be great at it. Obviously, our number one priority is an exceptional student athlete experience. We want to attract and retain the best and the brightest, and then set them up for success beyond their time at the University of Oregon. Fortunately, we're at a program that has a strong brand, so we have an opportunity to broaden, unite, and strengthen our Oregon family around athletic events, around alumni events throughout the country, throughout the world, and we take that role seriously. Obviously, as we'll talk about a little later, for us to be able to meet these goals, we work daily to enhance the resources to match the high expectations that those have for us and that we have for ourselves, quite frankly. And at the end, we have 20 sports, 500 student athletes, and we have a desire to compete for championships in all sports. If we sponsor it, we want to be great, and we work really, really hard to give our student athletes a chance to experience that opportunity at the University of Oregon. Just a quick look back. If you look back over the last decade plus, we've been able to have incredible, memorable moments. Many first evers for the University of Oregon, some first evers in all of college athletics, like the Triple Crown in women's track and field. To win the cross country championship, the indoor track championship, and the outdoor track championship in women's cross country and track and field in the same year is a remarkable accomplishment. And we've captured many of those others up there, whether it's winning a men's golf national championship at our home course at Eugene Country Club for all the world to watch on the Golf Channel. Our women's golf team has made it to the championship match. We've had a Heisman Trophy winner, the Campbell Trophy winner, which is essentially the academic Heisman. Final Fours, men's and women's basketball, some of the most iconic student athletes in the history of the university. So it's been a phenomenal run, and it's allowed us to recruit nationally and internationally and compete at the highest level. Here's the resources that we currently have allocated in the current fiscal year to be able to do that. As you look at this $145 million budget, we put it into the major categories of revenue and expense. As you look at the revenue side, I think we've shared it multiple times, football is the economic engine for Oregon athletics. We'll share a little bit more about this later, but we are essentially self-support. And so that football success, largely tied to ticket sales and donations, which some is transactional and connected to those tickets, others just straight philanthropic, are extremely important to fund 500 student athletes in the other 19 sports. On the right side, you can see there, obviously, salary benefits, scholarships. Debt is largely tied to Matthew Knight Arena. That's about $16 million a year of our budget. That debt continues for another 15 years. We're about halfway through that $200 million bond issuance. And we do pay rack rate for scholarships. So if we offer a scholarship to a student athlete, we pay the university's rack rate approximately 85% of our scholarship student athletes are non-resident, so they are out of state, heavy out of state. And we'll share a little bit more information on that with you. Let's see if I think I caught everything there. That budget is roughly a top 25 budget. It's we fluctuate somewhere probably between 20 and 25 in most years. Here's that scholarship support that I referenced. So amongst our 20 sports and 500 student athletes are 242.3 full scholarship equivalencies. By NCAA rule, some sports you can award equivalencies, meaning you can break up the NCAA maximum allowable NCAA scholarships. Some are called head count sports, where if you give a scholarship, it counts as a full, so you give a full scholarship. So there you can see how it's divvied up amongst full rides, partials, walk-ons, and then the breakdown of the cost of attendance. Because again, and we'll talk a little bit about this more, the changing landscape of the NCAA, we can now provide that personal expense line, which is cost of attendance. And that was one of the first changes that we moved towards this new NCAA model. So, that bottom box there, our total cost of scholarships this year will be just under $19 million for tuition fees, housing, book supplies, cost of attendance, and then transportation. Institutional funding, as you look back over the last several years, we received the least amount of institutional support or state support for athletics. And so we have leaned heavily on that philanthropy, on that football success, on the brand, again, to be able to cover 20 sports, 500 student athletes, and compete at the highest level in all of those.
Rob, could I jump in for just a minute, if you don't mind, if you're done with the slide? I just want to clarify, because we've been talking about how the university doesn't transfer tuition or general funds to the athletic department. And so I just wanted to clarify that line that shows, even though we're the lowest, there still is what is classified as institutional support. And I wanted to make sure that people understood what that represented. So about this year, where you see the 22, that 0.53, that's 530,000. Those are very specific sports lottery funds that come from the state that are specifically given to universities for athletic departments. And there's a very, they're not part of the general fund, and there's a very specific way they have to be spent on revenue sports, non-revenue sports, women and men's sports. And then I believe, although you should confirm, that those other numbers that are shown here are really funding that ASUO used to take from ASUO student fees and use to buy athletic tickets for students. So if you can confirm I'm accurate, I just want to make sure that the trustees are seeing an integrated picture when we talk about this issue.
Do you think that's representative of the other schools as well, that some of the funding is really buying tickets? I mean, there's something in return to the students. Do you think that's true at UCLA and Washington probably as well?
No, I think that a lot of those funds are student fees, direct student fees that are part of the fee structure that goes directly to athletics. I don't know the breakdown by school.
For each of the schools listed, it's really a composition of student fees, institutional, general fund support, and then any state support, such as the lottery dollars that we receive.
One more financial slide, and then we'll get to other. Just, obviously we like to look at a lot of metrics to compare ourselves, and this just kind of takes University of Oregon athletics versus top 20 Division I revenue generators in the most recent data, which looks like is from 21-22. So you can just see what the top 20 average in every category: revenue, subsidy. Obviously, football is the driver for most schools. You can look at the capacity, average attendance, ticket revenue, which is extremely important, men's basketball, which is also a revenue generator. And just by comparison, see how we stack up with the peer group that we compete with. So I guess we're quite proud of the fact of the experience that we offer, the competitive excellence that we achieve across the board, with the efficiency of how we allocate our revenue, and are able to compete, box above our weight class, if you will. All right. Obviously, we've seen a lot of change, and I've referenced it a couple of times already. You know, the NCAA over the last several years has had a philosophical shift, and we've talked about it here. We've talked about it in some of the orientations that we've done. The NCAA has moved from a philosophical shift of legislating competitive equity, so creating rules that create a level playing field, to one that allows more permissive student athlete support. And we've listed some of the things that have happened since 2015, as well as, you know, the estimated annual financial impact. So, you know, several rules have changed since 15, which allow us to do more student athlete meals and more nutrition. You know, there was a point in time several years ago where it became a bit of a joke that we could provide bagels, but we couldn't provide the spread for the bagels because of NCAA rules. Those are all now gone. So we can essentially provide what is equivalent of unlimited meals, nutrition bars. For example, for all 500 of our student athletes, they have an opportunity to go to a brunch at the HDC Monday through Friday between 7 and noon, whatever fits their schedule. Every single student athlete, walk on to full scholarship, you have access to that meal every single day. Every single student athlete, walk on to full scholarship, has access to numerous nutrition bars, which would include protein bars, protein shakes, and all sorts of other things that our nutritionists stock in those nutrition bars at a variety of locations. The Alston Academic Award, if you were following many of the court rulings against the NCAA, there was the Alston ruling, which essentially indicated freed up the ability for the NCAA member institutions to provide additional resources for academics. That might be a computer, it could be a number of other things. But also as a part of that, it allowed institutions to create a policy which allowed you to provide up to $5,980 per year to a student athlete for academic achievement that you defined. So we provide this in the most generous way possible. Again, every student athlete at the University of Oregon, walk on to full scholarship, receives $5,980 in cash if they meet the minimum academic requirements, are eligible 2.0 on the roster, full-time enrolled. So again, was an opportunity for us to provide financial assistance for all student athletes. Cost of attendance, we mentioned on the previous slide, you know, that's a financial aid calculation. We get that number from Roger Thompson, and we add it to the scholarship in the proportion of the scholarship that the student athlete receives. So if you're a 50% scholarship recipient, you're getting 50% of that cost of attendance within your full scholarship. And some rules have changed around transportation, recruiting, insurance, and medical support. You know, the Pac-12 was one of the first to be aggressive in making sure that we provide medical support beyond eligibility for 4 years for athletically related injuries that occur at your institution. And then just this past year, the NCAA rules changed to increase the permissible number of paid assistant coaches. If we were to take all of our volunteers that were now permitted to be full-time head coaches by the change in the NCAA rules, we would have added 22 FTEs. We were not in the financial position to add 22 FTEs. We did add 4. And so you can see the financial impact in it. So this slide just gives you a sense of this ongoing change that's been happening at the NCAA level, you know, through a philosophical shift of rules, and then some court decisions as well. Any questions on that?
Rob, I have one, and it's you can tell us later, or if you don't have it. I'm just curious if the vast majority of our student athletes utilize coming in and taking their meals at Jaquan, and also with the scholarship, the 5,900, the percentage out of those 500 that achieved those academic goals to be able to receive that.
So on the meal part, we do it at the HDC, not the Jaquan. So it's over at the dining hall at the HDC. We track that. It's less than you would hope.
It's over 300 per day, which isn't bad.
Right. In some sports that have, again, this is nuance. There are some sports who train on the main part of campus, and because of training and academic schedule, might opt to take a dining hall allotment instead of the HDC. So we try to manage that as best we can. We also have some opportunity for the sports that compete in Matthew Knight Arena because we have a smaller kitchen. We can do some things there, but we do track it. We would love for it to be 100%. We know the NCAA data that the two things that could impact performance most are sleep and nutrition. So we are constantly following that. The second part of the question, I think it's pretty close to 100%. I don't know. So, I'm trying to think of, if you're not academically eligible, you're obviously not eligible for that award, but
Yeah, it's continuing eligibility and retention into the next term, and it's a very high percentage that earn the Austin Award.
and as you would expect, student athletes are very dialed. It's awarded, it's paid by term. So in about November, we'll get questions. When is the fall term going to show up in my account? This is really important to us. This is why we do what we do, and that's the student athlete experience and support. And just wanted to list out in the major buckets of all the support that are provided to student athletes, and just as a point of reference, attempt to quantify that. It is an estimate, but when you look at the number of programs that we provide for all 500 student athletes, again, everyone is, receives this support, from free tutoring to opportunities for mentorship program. We just had 12 student athletes, for example, go with staff down to the Bay Area for a Bay Area experience, which was professional development. They went, we connected with some alums who, either have businesses or in leadership roles in the Bay Area, and gave our 12 student athletes who were able to go, a chance to go sit in these businesses and learn. We've done something similar in LA, so we're building out that type of experience. But that's just one example of all that we can do. Obviously, we've significantly increased our mental health resources over the last 6 or 7 years, and continue to evaluate how we can meet that need that all college students are experiencing. So again, I think it's important, again, to look at all that is provided to our student athletes, and we're very proud of this. We have staff who've chosen to dedicate their life's work to these areas. Again, we think it's something that sets us apart, and our staff all feel connection to this mission. The other thing that's extremely important, the partnership between Dr. Alex Asenso, Oregon Athletics, and our student athletes is our work in DEIB. We've added, our Be Oregon campaign, which we kind of built off the Nike Be True several years ago, was becoming so visible with our fan base. It was really kind of an internal mantra of encouraging our student athletes and staff to be their authentic selves. We started showcasing it at events with the logo that you see, and then there was demand from our fan base and the public to create kind of a licensing program around this mark. That program, Be Oregon, was recognized in 2021 or 2022 by the NCAA with an award around DEIB. A little over a year ago, we created a new position, a Chief Diversity Officer within athletics, to carry on the work that our Community Inclusion Committee was doing. So we have somebody who's on the senior staff, dedicated full-time job to our work, important work in this area. Obviously, our Go Do Anything campaign around the 50th anniversary of Title IX was an extreme success. And our Women in Flight grassroots fundraising campaign continues to get incredible attention from our peers on how that's working. Dave and Nancy Petrone several years ago challenged us with a lead gift to create something unique for women's athletics, and we created the Women in Flight program, which has been incredible from a grassroots standpoint of participation in events, and also generated some resources that's allowed us to do things like international trips, kind of team retreats, So for women's athletes, and has been extremely successful. Again, when you look at the number of programs that reach out to us, trying to learn about how that's been successful, we're very, very proud of that. Obviously, we're spending some time here this year, and currently focusing on Big Ten membership and transition. We're very proud members of the Pac-12 through August 1st, 2024. And then after that, we'll become members of the Big Ten. Obviously, the Big Ten is the premier academic and athletic conference in the country. As we've learned through this process, it's incredible, the Big Ten Academic Alliance and the academic collaborations that happen at some of the finest institutions in the country through membership in that conference is something that will benefit all of us. The opportunity to enhance our national visibility, being a members of the Big Ten, the reach for the university, for our athletic department, and for our student athletes, it's something that has tremendous benefit. At a time when we've seen a big shift in college athletics, for the reasons that I mentioned before of this philosophical change. You started seeing significant conference movement back in 2021, more in 2022. This offered us a chance for long-term stability as this landscape continues to evolve, because further deregulation is coming. There's ongoing conversations around even more significant deregulation at the NCAA level. Move also gives us an opportunity to enter new markets and for our student athletes to continue to compete at the highest level, which is extremely important to them and to us. And again, for us, it's another opportunity to ensure that we're delivering on maximizing that student athlete experience. So a lot of work ahead, but exciting work and a great opportunity. And then this is the last slide, and then take any questions that you guys have. The current landscape, it continues to change. Whether it's around conference realignment, rule deregulation, pending court cases, it is a time of significant change in college athletics. NIL has created change. There's a widening resource gap. And as we move to more permissive legislation, there is more pressure on those resources, because it will be the resources that make somewhat of a determination on what level that you can compete at. We've also seen evolving consumer behaviors and ticket sales trends. We're very excited about this season. We've had incredible demand for Oregon football. We're close to selling out Colorado. USC is essentially already a sellout. We've got 2 other games that are tracking towards sellout. So really excited there. So, as we see more deregulation, the great news is it allows permissive opportunities to do more for student athletes. And as you've seen on all the past legislative changes, we've done all that we can to make sure that we apply that across the board. That will continue to be our goal, is to provide these student athlete support and benefits. And like every industry, every sector, we face inflationary pressure and staff retention issues on an ongoing basis. And again, our goal is to make sure that we retain those who are committed to our mission, but we have to do so in an efficient and fiscally responsible way. So very proud of what we accomplished. Much work to do ahead, but we're up for the challenge and excited to do it.
Great, thanks, Rob. Let's open up for questions.
So I know, Rob, the basketball team has in the past done some international travel. Is the Big Ten, is that a more likely international venue for the institutions?
I think so one of our goals, we had both women's basketball and volleyball did international trips this summer. And by NCAA rule, you can do one of those every 4 years. Men's basketball was at Canada, I think 2 years ago. So we will try to continue to do those opportunities. Those are, as we have tightening resources, those are nice twos, not have twos, and we love providing that experience. We also do an international service trip annually through our Student Athlete Development Office in partnership with Courts for Kids. This year they went to Dominican Republic. So we
Yes.
took 21, I think 17 student athletes and 3 or 4 staff to the Dominican Republic to a remote community, and you build a court that's kind of a community center. If you haven't seen the videos that our team posts around those, I would encourage you to. Similar, women's basketball had a phenomenal trip to London and Athens this summer. Incredible experience that they did a great job of documenting. So our goal would be to continue to provide those opportunities where we can.
Those are constrained by the NC2A?
I do think there's been so much deregulation. You used to be able to do those once every 4 years by sport. I think that rule still is in place.
I believe it is.
Right. And when we're internationally traveling, are there recruitment opportunities? Are we taking advantage of that, looking for students from these?
So the coaches are not allowed to go out and recruit.
I know that. But
Oh, is the university? I would think I'm not familiar. I know they've done a bunch of recruitment activities around bowl games, but I don't know that any have occurred on any of these international trips.
Other questions? Go ahead.
I just had one question on who determines the 2.0 GPA. Is it the NCAA or is it within the university?
So the court gave full flexibility, the NCAA gave full flexibility, and then it was delegated to the conference. The conference that we were in at the time gave full flexibility, which I think was standard across, so it was institutional. We worked through the IAAC. Our faculty athletic rep led the effort, but we worked through the Intercollegiate Athletic Committee. I think they did share it with the faculty advisory committee, and then the athletic senior staff developed our policy.
Is there ever an opportunity to looking to increase GPAs, or is there?
So there was a lot of debate between academic performance and equity. So we had considerable input on both of those, and where our institution landed out, and I understand many others have across the country, was the goal was to provide this as financial support. So the parameters lean towards kind of the minimum standards.
And Ruby, the NCAA does have NCAA minimum continuing eligibility GPA standards.
Just real quick, first of all, I want to thank you. I think we're really fortunate to have you in leadership in athletics and your team. Last spring, I think we had the opportunity to have lunch as part of our board meeting with some student athletes, which I found really helpful. And I just thought I'd share with you, first of all, I really appreciated them making themselves available for that. And I think it was down in Eugene. But I'll just tell you the thing I heard more about than anything else was food. That what's important to you, what drives you, what attracts you to Oregon, what's your dissatisfier, and that's if you are on the south side of the river. It was all about food. So I'll just share that with you.
Nutrition is extremely important. If you look at what's changed in college athletics in the last 6 or 7 years, when I arrived here in 2010, we didn't even have a nutrition. It wasn't a position. Now we have a whole staff of nutritionists, and not only educating around nutrition or preparation or healthy habits, but also making sure that in addition to the meals that we serve, we have these nutrition bars that are essentially 24/7 for hydration and fuel. It's extremely important. Again, if you were to look at the NCAA surveys, the two things that can have the biggest impact on performance are sleep, which is alarming how little some elite athletes are getting, and nutrition. So it's extremely important.
I have a couple questions. One for Eric. On slide 9, we talk about the investment we make for each student athlete, and there's a footnote of what's excluded. I think do we use 500 students in that number? It's 155,000 per student.
Yes.
Okay, excluding scholarships and excluding coaches' pay and AD salary and debt service. So that's the investment we make to help their experience be positive and successful. So it's a big number.
Yeah, and that's something that we feel is really important to put out there and make visible, because so much goes in when you look at those 4 buckets of student athlete support that Rob walked us through. There's a lot of investment in staffing and programming and resources. And again, with deregulation, that number is growing every year. And what we're able to do, it's a matter of finding a way to do it.
Yeah.
But that's something that gets lost, and that does not include their scholarships. So when
Right.
you've got a student athlete on a full scholarship, it's over $200,000 per year.
That goes all the way from the free tutoring I mentioned to, we have a primary care physician who is 1.0 in athletics. So it's not quite concierge medicine, but it's pretty close.
And then Rob, for you, we talked when the article came out on beach volleyball, and of course, there's always more to the story, but you also acknowledged that there was areas for improvement. Could you just share with the group what's on your mind on that?
Sure.
subject?
So there were two areas that we knew we needed to address with beach volleyball. One we've been working on for several years, and that's a facility. Our team competes at Amazon Park, which is a great community park in Eugene. However, for an elite level collegiate program, we knew we needed to build an on-campus facility. We've been working through campus planning for several years to try to find a location. We have restricted funds dedicated to that project. Once we get a site, we'll be able to move on that project. And then building out a scholarship plan. The NCAA allows 6 beach volleyball scholarships in equivalency sport. So we are currently working with the coach to build out a recruiting plan to start ramping up on that scholarship. Those were the two areas of need in that program. Again, beach volleyball players get the Alston funds, the academic, all the other things that we've listed. But those were the two areas that we needed to improve on, and when we're focused on that.
Thanks. I wanted to make sure we talked about that.
Great. Thank you.
So, yeah, Amy.
Thank you. I was trying to recall from our conversation in my training about the split in scholarship dollars between men and women with Title IX. Is it equal, or how does that work?
We have not, so there's 3 prongs to comply with Title IX. We have not leaned on direct proportionality. We've kind of tended to be in either interest and abilities, meeting the interest and abilities of the students, or expansion. So over the last several years, we've added sports. So we are not in direct proportionality at this point, but we're still leaning on the interest and abilities and the continuing expansion.
So what's the rough split between supportive male versus female? I know with football being, it's kind of a tough
Right, but that has to be
equation.
included. Yeah, but it has to be included in the calculation.
Yeah, so with
Mhm.
participation, we're at around 51-49, so pretty close to 50-50, but we lag by a few percentage points on student body enrollment for full-time undergraduate. On scholarships, we're closer to 54-46, 55-45, male to female ratio.
Hey, Rob.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Just on the DEIB work, it's really great to see. I don't know if I've seen a slide before, so I appreciate you sharing that. I'd be curious how much of the student athlete experience in terms of retention is around sort of the structure of the athletics program, and how much of it's around the DEIB work. Both are important, I'm sure, but I'd love to see if there's any learnings that we could bring back to the other side of campus.
I don't know that I could put a percentage on it, but I will say this for us, which kind of goes back to Jenny's comment. We have high participation in SAC, which is called it is the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. So it's a group of student athlete leaders. Your goal is to have representation from every team. They come together and give a lot of feedback. So we have great participation there, high attendance at meetings. They have a lot of subcommittees, and they share a lot of feedback and a lot of input with us. As a part of that committee, they have a Beat Oregon subcommittee, a mental health, they call it Duck the Stigma subcommittee. Their subcommittee work is phenomenal. So we partner with them, sometimes with Dr. Hall at the Multicultural Center on a lot of events. We've also had a community inclusion committee that has been very successful in our department for years. But bringing on Damone Merkerson as our Chief Diversity Officer has us with a leadership position that's able to integrate the DEIB work through all the other work that we're doing, while also, working with Yvette on Ideal, LACE, Gallup, all the institutional efforts. So retention, I think it's very helpful. Obviously, student athlete feedback is important, and we we've been able to do some pretty unique programming based on that student input and feedback. For example, several years ago, Ruthie Hebert was a phenomenal student athlete. We did just kind of a staff panel, voluntary, or a staff event with a student athlete panel to talk about the student athlete experience in Eugene for those that were not from Oregon or from Eugene. And, from that conversation, we learned a lot. Ruthie kind of gave some ideas, and, this year we did some unique programming, based on some things that we learned from Ruthie, 5 or 6 years ago. So I think there's great collaboration on many levels. It's just trying to carve out time for students, particularly student athletes, beyond all the mandatory things that they already have. We all want more engagement from staff and student athletes, but ours has been pretty good.
I just have one question. Hey, Rob, how are you? So as we think about this transition to the Big Ten, and the big thing has been student travel and all that time that it will take, what are the plans from Big Ten to, are they going to set up divisions, and when should we expect to know kind of how that will all play out?
Yeah, so that's TBD. I will say that everybody is focused on it, obviously. So about half of our sports, their regular season won't change. Only half of our sports will play a Big Ten regular season. But the Big Ten member institutions and us understand that priority. So I don't know. We don't have a timeline exactly when the schedules will be developed for every sport. But there are ongoing conversations around how can we solve some of this travel creatively. And there's and you almost have to look at it by sport because every sport is a bit unique. Volleyball might be different than baseball and softball. But one of the things that we're talking about internally, for example, let's use volleyball. Our volleyball team already this year has been to Hawaii, and this weekend they're going to travel to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. When we join the Big Ten, we might keep our non-conference travel much more regional because our conference travel will be more out of region. So that's one of the things that we can control internally. But I know the league, the commissioner, his staff, all the member institutions are spending considerable time about, what should be the number of league contests? Are there ways to mitigate that travel? For spring sports, they will be playing during our spring break. So is that when we could have our long travel? There's lots of little things. You almost have to look at it by sport, but it is a priority. I know that's a little bit of an incomplete answer, but that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So, Rob, in a changing landscape, you've been a trusted and level-headed pilot, captain of our ship. What was the year you started here?
Fall of 2010.
In 2010. Our budget's $145 million. Do you remember what it was in 2010?
Half that, probably.
Yeah, I started in 2012, and I think it was around 88. Jamie, you probably remember.
I can't remember that far back.
And since 2010, what major facilities have we put on campus for the athletic department?
Wow. So we've built the HDC, Jane Sanders Stadium, the office tower at Matthew Knight Arena.
Jake,
that was done just as I got here. We obviously Hayward, Hayward's been redone. The north side of Autzen, the walkways and landscaping.
Mariota
Sport Performance Center, phenomenal facility. Still have professional teams coming through on a very regular basis to tour that.
It's been a lot of investment.
Yeah, there's been a significant investment.
And Phil and Penny Knight, we very much appreciate them, but many other donors as well.
Yeah, no, Mr. and Mrs. Knight have been phenomenal, and so many others have been extremely generous to allowing us to meet that student athlete experience. And obviously there's a lot of field replay. We put a new turf at Pape. Those are significant projects that may not be as recognized.
The headlines, but it's millions of dollars.
We've redone the kind of student athlete support areas in Matthew Knight Arena. So
Autzen video board.
Board, significant.
So I think the point of ending with that is just to reiterate, Carl had shared this, you shared it, to be able to operate financially independent of the university. And that's something that gets lost oftentimes. And it's a big budget. not using the academic resources to promote athletics has been huge for our university, and has also been huge as a billboard for our university of raising our profile and our brand. And one of the reasons we were invited to find a home as the Pac-12 was changing. And so really appreciate your leadership, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time.
Just one thing, to, sorry, to Trustee Tyson's question, and also so Trustee Wool knows it. In terms of interest and ability, which is the prong on Title IX that we rest on most heavily, we're about to put a survey out to our freshmen, to all of our undergraduate students, including the incoming students, and looking for a robust response. But it is our, about every half decade, we check in to see what interest is out there of students who have the ability to compete at the sort of level that we compete at, to make sure that we're offering them sports. So really hoping that we'll get a robust response from our students in the next month.
Right. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, our final agenda item, and I think we're in. Hi, John. It's good to see you. Come on up. John Tapania is really the person that everybody in the state of Oregon, in the world, goes to. Well, okay, state of Oregon, whatever, for economic forecast, economic impact, really a trusted source, knowledgeable source in our state, and appreciated. I know you get invited to speak to groups like us often, and it's because of your reputation, your knowledge. We have 30 minutes, and we would like you to leave at least 10 minutes, maybe 15 for questions. I think those would be better. So I'll give you a time check if you start getting outside the guardrails. But we appreciate you being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, so John Taponia with Echo Northwest, coming up on its 50th anniversary. It's an economic consulting firm that we might characterize as a spin-off out of the University of Oregon, founded in 1974 by longtime economics professor Ed Whitelaw. First, I will say congratulations on choosing a new president. Connie, without disclosing anything in detail, suggested that we would be excited about this choice, and there was certainly cheers coming out of all of our offices.
That's right. Sure.
So welcome to Oregon.
Thank you.
All right, so I've got a couple of parts to this presentation. A piece of it is, first part is how are things going in Portland? And I have been told multiple times as I've done this presentation that it is terribly depressing. So I'm going to sort of scale back some of the doom and move through that, and then talk a little bit about the university and its role in the economy with a focus on Portland. So let's step through this first piece, the Portland conditions. So the question here you really have to ask yourself is, which Portland are you talking about? Are you talking about the region of Portland? Are you talking about the city of Portland? Or are you talking about downtown Portland? Or I might even say, even more specifically, are you talking about where we are literally sitting right now, Old Town Portland? And you can come in from the region into this specific neighborhood, and the conditions and the outlook change as you do that. So that's my first piece here is which Portland, the region, the city, or the downtown. Here are the regional job outcomes for Portland metro area versus the rest of the United States. And you can see we went deep into the pandemic loss and never quite caught up to the nation. A lot of that was driven by a much more sort of conservative approach to pandemic. We didn't open up our services sector as quickly as many other places in the country did, and we haven't quite caught up. But if this were the chart that folks from across the country were looking at, we would not be on the front pages of the New York Times or the Seattle Times or the LA Times. Our regional outcomes are not really extraordinary. They're somewhere in the middle of the pack. So something else is going on that is bringing us into these news cycles. Here is population change by the 4 largest counties in the metropolitan area. This goes back to 2011, and you can sort of see the rise and fall. The blue bars are net migration, either in or out. The red is the net change in natural population, so births minus deaths. And what you can see in most of these counties is that, and this is the case for Oregon, that net increase in population is disappearing. For the state as a whole, it went negative in 2020. We were thinking it was going to be about 2028, but the pandemic accelerated that timeline. So if you go back to the old Tom McCall visit but don't stay piece, in this environment, we would be a shrinking state because our natural rate of population has gone negative, and it's going to remain negative for as far as the eye can see. But then you see these very differential population outcomes for each of these four counties, and clearly the one that stands out is Multnomah County right in the center. So this gets into my story of the center. Now that's a story that is relatively consistent across a lot of major metropolitan areas. People are moving out of centers and into big suburban homes where they can do work from home and hybrid, et cetera. And so some of that story is consistent, but these losses in the city of Portland and Multnomah County are high relative to some of our peers, higher than the losses that you would see in a proportional sense in Seattle or Nashville or Austin or Salt Lake City, et cetera. So there is something different going on in Portland relative to those other places. These are, you've probably seen many, many, many versions of this in the popular press, thanks to privacy invasion on your cell phones. We can now sort of measure foot traffic through this outfit called Placer AI, and they've done a really good job of sort of benchmarking where both visitor activity is and employee activity is relative to pre-pandemic. You can see on the left, we've had pretty good recovery of visitors, but the downtown, which is literally from here sort of over to the Coin Tower, is still well off the recovery of the rest of the central city. And you see that same dynamic going on there. The downtown geography of Portland is very highly concentrated in office and very low in resident composition. And so consequently, we, like many other places, our office occupancy is still down 50% or so relative to pre-pandemic.
Don, I'm sorry, what are you calling Central City so that we have?
Central City goes as far north as sort of Lower Albina, so the Rose Quarter and all of that. Then you go over to the West End, you go south to South Waterfront, and you go east into the Central East Side, and that kind of that's your Central City.
I might be missing something on how these graphs are put together. I see the Central City and downtown, but should there be another line for that baseline? Where's the baseline at?
Well, you're comparing it to the sort of the pre-pandemic, so the
It's just by the date.
yeah.
All right.
Now, this is some work that was done by the University of Toronto, and it's imperfect because they in some ways are comparing apples to oranges in their downtown comparisons a little bit, but I found it useful enough to at least make the point. What they've done here is they've gone across downtowns all throughout Canada and the United States, and they have compared their downtown recoveries, that is on the vertical axis, to two different metrics. These are correlations, these are not causation, but it does start to tell a story. The one on the left is looking at the share of jobs in the city that are in the professional, scientific, management, sort of office jobs. And what you see is those cities that have higher shares of sort of college-educated office workers have had slower downtown recoveries, and that's very intuitive. I mean, you can use one company as an example in downtown that tells the story. Standard Insurance, their CEO co-chairing the downtown task force with the governor. that is a kind of job that lends itself to hybrid work. And that CEO and that company are going to continue to accommodate that on behalf of their employees. They would have a very hard time hiring otherwise. And it then fills into all kinds of other sort of software, legal services, et cetera, office jobs as well. On the right-hand side is transit use. So again, sort of a correlation that this University of Toronto is finding between cities that had sort of relatively well-built out transit systems and people using them seem to have a bit of a correlation with weaker downtown recovery. So if you sort of sit back and say, boy, here we were in 2017 circa Portland, and we had built with a vision of a region with college-educated workers that were using transit, sort of that strategy didn't end up working well with respect to a world of hybrid and remote work. Then, in terms of things that might be a little bit different or potentially exacerbating those population numbers, and I don't want to say there's any sort of definitive story here, but when you come across charts like these, you have to show them. We did, during the pandemic, pass 2 sizable local income taxes in the region, and sort of back to back. So one was an income tax on high earners to pay for homelessness services. The subsequent one was a relatively high local income tax for universal pre-kindergarten. They both passed, I think, with pretty good margins. But here we are in a region that within this metropolitan area, you already have the biggest juxtaposition of a difference in taxation of anywhere in the United States, with relatively small income taxation. You now have a capital gains tax up in Washington State, but for years you never did. They were consumption-based taxes on the Washington side. You got income-based taxes on the Oregon side. So there was always an incentive for people to move. And now you sort of added a couple sizable taxes right on the river, and people only have to move six miles to relieve themselves of it. So what this chart is showing is out of IRS data. The yellow golden color is the average gross income of people who stayed in Multnomah County for between each of those tax years. Red is the average gross income of tax filers who moved from Multnomah to Clark County, and the green is going the other way, from Clark County to Multnomah County. So if you go back as recently as 2018, you would say the incomes of the leavers and the arrivers were the same, and then boom, you got this huge surge, and I would expect that you're going to see comparable numbers in 2022 on that as well. You can talk to all kinds of local accounting firms as to why that might be.
John, are you looking at this? Are you looking at this also in terms of like businesses moving?
These are individuals.
These are individuals.
And unfortunately, we don't have a data source that's as helpful with. I mean, you can track some sort of high-profile movement out of, say, downtown and into Lake Oswego and other places, but this is sort of as good as we have right now. For data. So that's the Portland story, and happy to elaborate in the 10 minutes of Q&A. So now let's move to, I think maybe a little bit.
Just real quick, what percent of the budget for either the county or the city is supported by property taxes?
Oh, the county or the city?
Maybe in combination, approximately.
Yeah, boy, a good, a good share of it. I don't have
like 80% or 60%.
Well, I mean, you've got mixes of direct service fees. So, like the Water Bureau, for example, in Portland, is covered completely by user fees. Yeah. You've got on the county side, you've got a bunch of budget dollars that come down from the federal government or from the state to run behavioral health, et cetera. But in terms of their general funds, a majority of both of those jurisdictions are relying on the property tax. So now pivoting a little bit and thinking about the university's role in Portland, we could sort of blend this and say university's role in the state of Oregon as well. This out of this university economic development department, sort of thinking about the university's role in the economy in three broad themes. One is as a talent creator. You are a pipeline creator of talent, and we'll talk a little bit about that. One is as a placemaker, and I would say that Eugene, without the University of Oregon, would be Roseburg. It has a tremendous impact on that community, and you can think about that with respect to the Concordia neighborhood as well, and the impact that you will have there. And then the university's role as an innovator, and I would say, among many other things, the whole notion of jogging as a form of exercise was an innovation that grew out of this university and helped create an entire sector that Mr. Boyle and others participate in terms of athletic and sportswear. So this slide just sort of speaks to how those pieces sort of play into our framework or understanding of how a regional economy works. So just ever so briefly, our founder, Ed Whitelaw, and former U of O professor, would say that a regional economy is built on foundational capital of human, natural, physical, and social capital. So human is obviously the talent of the people who are working there. Natural capital are the resources either enjoyed or extracted to create economic activity. Physical would be all the infrastructure, housing, and the like. And social capital would be the glue that pulls the institutions that pull humans together and help them do good things. And you've got a local sector, people that sort of transact face to face within the region that would sit on top of that. The healthcare sector, although healthcare can be sort of traded and local, local K-12 education, utilities, et cetera. And then you get up to what's called the traded sector, the exporters, the people that are creating things to sell to other states or to other countries, et cetera. And big ones here in this region certainly are the athletic, high tech, and software and
Columbia Sportswear.
and sportswear. Absolutely. So that's sort of just the big overarching piece. So now let's sort of step through and think about the Ducks as a talent pipeline. So I don't know, I hadn't spent a whole lot of time with these data, but came across them at Tim's urging from the census, which these are still called sort of experimental data, but they're starting to take, I think, tax records or something and matching them up against higher ed records and able to follow these cohorts. And these are fairly old cohorts. I think these folks have been out of school for 10 years and this is the University of Oregon, and following them into broad categories of industries. And you look at it, and it's intuitive. You've got educational service. You've got a big, robust education school. So not surprising. You've got educational services, a big one. Professional, scientific, and technical. I don't think this has a law school in it, but it certainly has architecture and a whole host of other sort of professional service work in there. And then healthcare and social assistance, robust schools of psychology, sociology, and the like are feeding those. And Steve, you've got right there below, you've got the next one is finance. So
in the middle.
And on down the list. But if you take those first three, you're getting close to 50%, if you're just trying to simplify things in your head, 50% of graduates are moving into these three broad industries, and then it goes into a long list of smaller pieces. So now if we sort of think about the workforce challenges that are ahead of us, I would say there is one major known, and there is one major known unknown in front of us. And so the known is, let's look at the share of Oregon workers in those three big industries. And I could have gone down the list even further and we'd have found similar things. What share of Oregon workers in those industries are age 55 plus? If I had asked that question back in 1992, it would have been close to 10%, would have been 55 plus. Now we're approaching a quarter in all of those. Former CBO director Douglas Holtz-Eakin sort of looked at these data right before the pandemic and ran some numbers across the country and said that by 2029, this is before the pandemic, but by 2029, he anticipated that Oregon would be short about, I'll have to get you back on the number. But I'll give you the number on the number of people short on BAs. And then it was something like a $10 billion economic output gap because of the BA shortage, because of retirements that weren't being filled in. I think 88,000 was his number of BA shortage by 2029. So then we go into this known unknown, and this is a known unknown that has changed pretty dramatically over the course of the last year with the release of ChatGPT. David Otter is my favorite labor economist out of MIT, and I'll just read this. AI has extended the frontier of technological possibilities toward the boundaries that are barely visible at present. The tasks that machines will be able to accomplish, the rate at which new innovations may emerge, and the speed with which socially impactful technological innovations may diffuse is unknown. The range of possibilities has surely gotten broader, and our uncertainty about the boundaries has accordingly diminished. Now, if I looked at David Otter 10 years ago, David Otter would have sort of been a typical economist, sort of a technical skeptic, and still been relatively confident that humans weren't going to be turned into horses anytime soon by technology. But I think you start to read this literature now, and there's just an awful lot more concern out there. ChatGPT, there's some early studies on that, sort of tying it into individual industry returns in the stock market already. And you do see, in terms of those big three, I think that professional, scientific, technical industry cluster is one that is more exposed to ChatGPT. Lower on the list, but not completely out of exposure, are the education and the healthcare industries, where you're always going to need a little bit more of caregiving help, a little bit more of human interaction.
John, before we move on to the questions, you have good questions in there, but I want to make sure that we have chance for everybody here to ask questions of you as well. And we've got 10 minutes. We could fudge it a little bit, so we'll come back. But let me open it up first before we get to the last 4 slides. Any questions anybody has for John on the data about Portland, or about how this influences with our move into Portland, with our Portland campus? Any questions?
So I guess I would just ask, so there's shortage in workers, the rise of AI, the aging population, and the need for services all kind of comes together into a giant cluster.
Collision.
So can you comment a little bit on your crystal ball there in terms of, I guess you could just say leveraging of AI to fill some of these voids? And then I guess my other part of the question is, with our immigration laws being so broken right now nationally, it seems like we're potentially missing out on an opportunity for more people to have opportunity in our state to fill these vacancies. And of course, that higher ed plays a role in that, filling that gap with potentially those inflows to fill the 88,000 shortage.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think on both of those, learn as much as we can, and the learning takes place literally month by month, I think. I mean, I think it would be helpful for the university to sort of step through these analyses of AI's exposure into various industries and occupations. One that I think you have to watch very carefully is the legal profession. AI's advantage is that it has read every law that's ever been written and every ruling that has ever been written, and it has it all. Now you've seen probably in the popular press that people sort of started going down that path and have tripped over themselves by citing things that didn't exist and that kind of thing. But if you talk to the head of Schwabe here in town, she would say that people coming out of law school now are already being asked questions about how they respond to a piece of case law. Then type in the same question into ChatGPT, get its answers, and now compare your answer to the robot's answer. It's the legal profession, just one example of one that's going to have to look hard. And I think our architecture and others that have a fair bit of technology in them, I think are ones to keep an eye on. I think with respect to your question on immigration, there are quite a few service-related jobs that may lend themselves to people with relatively new skills coming into a country that are less exposed. So there are many occupations in our economy that have far less exposure than some of these professional office jobs, and where I think the demographic play is probably the more dominant of those. Does that work?
Toy, do you have a question?
One question. So when I first moved here, you couldn't stop the New York Times from writing about how great Portland was and how many people were moving here. As a state that is very dependent on income tax, just would love to hear if people are still moving to Oregon, even if they're not moving to Portland or staying in Portland.
Right.
What is that looking like?
Yes. And so we may have a bit of a lava lamp going on here, where we have for years had movement out of California into parts of Oregon on net, big, huge on net, and then from Oregon up to Washington, but in smaller numbers. So what we're losing in Portland to, say, Clark County or elsewhere in Washington, at least until recently, we have more than made up for by people moving out of California and into Southern Oregon. Consequently, you sort of get this confusing story of, our going up and sort of crying wolf about all this out-migration out of Portland, but then the state economist coming forward and saying we have $2 billion more in the general fund.
The biggest kicker ever, right?
And the biggest kicker ever.
Right.
Right. Now, some of that was inflation-generated bracket creep.
Yeah.
Good point.
That was a major driver. But you also you still have some net in-migration from California into what we lost in the last couple of years was the net migration from all other parts of the country into Portland. We used to get sort of a nice bump from the entire country, Brooklyn, New York, and other places. And that has flipped.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll finish here with these questions. I'll just I thought about the Concordia campus in particular. I thought about Portland, and these are just illustrative. I'll just read them real quick, and then we can have more questions. So first, how does Portland tell and disseminate its recovery story? And how does it rebuild its once strong brand? We've got a lot of good communicators and marketers, and you've got the journalism school active up here in Portland. We have to fix things for real before we can start telling the story and rebuild the brand. But when those positive stories start to emerge, we should tell them. One that's going to be very predictable is the opening of the new airport. That's going to be one of the most phenomenal public spaces in the United States. And we're going to have to take as much of a tailwind from that as we can get. Second one, how do the city's schools deliver value on the Student Success Act and its new investment in social emotional learning? So this in mind with the work at Fabian and the new initiative funded by the Bombers. Right before the pandemic, we passed a corporate activities tax at the state level that is generating something to the neighborhood of $800 million more a year into Oregon schools. And I would say to this point, if I had to sort of say, what has that generated? What is the net impact? Hard. I mean, obviously, it was a very tough environment to be delivering something, but tough to say. We have one of the highest one of the highest chronic absentee rates in our schools in the United States and the state of Oregon. I think it was 36% of Oregon students chronically absent, missing more than 10% of the school year. That is something this state has to wrap its head around and figure out how to correct, because if they're not showing up, they're not going to learn. How do the city schools revamp early literacy practices to catch up to Mississippi's progress? So, 15, 20 years ago, Mississippi, through their schools of education, and then getting into the practices in the schools, completely revamped the way they taught literacy. And the rest of the country, frankly, is attempting to catch up with their innovation. So again, given the importance of the School of Education at U of O and its innovations in the past, this is a place where I think the university could lean in both for the city's benefit, but then for the state as a whole. And then how can the city and region overhaul their regulatory processes to achieve the governor's ambitious housing production goals? If this state has had a self-inflicted economic wound, it is because we underproduced housing over the course of the last couple of decades. And we have a very good planning school at the University of Oregon that has deep understanding of regulatory barriers in the state. They've done surveys on this, et cetera. So how does this state start to build more like those parts of the country that have more expansionary vision of housing production? And then a little bit less related to Concordia, but certainly related to the Knight Center on Scientific Impact. How does the Portland region maintain its position as a global center of semiconductor research and development? An awful lot of thought going on to that. It is clear that the legislative action from this last session is going to turn into a long series of good news on expansions in Washington County over the course of the next couple of years, and U of O's got some of that talent pipeline that's going to feed into this. So those were just the ones that sort of came to top of mind, and happy to expand on it.
It's good food for thought. And the point of this presentation was really just to do that, and looking at our presence here in Portland. So just open it up one more time. Does anybody else have a question for John?
Well, I think actually not only the University of Oregon, but Portland State University and the other institutions in Portland can take a larger leadership role. This is one of the unusual things about the problem the city has today, which is typically something like this would be lack of funds. The city and the county and the state are awash in money, and they cannot figure it out. So this is really a conundrum, and the lack of leadership in the city and state, frankly, is quite demoralizing. So, is there anything we can do to nudge our leaders along?
I would imagine in your mind are responses to homelessness and other pieces here, it's public safety, et cetera, right here downtown. I would add to that again that I sense very little of an accountability framework around education, K-12 education in this state. There was one as the federal government was into No Child Left Behind and race to the top under Obama, et cetera. But those reform wins died in 2016, and I really see nobody spending a lot of focused time on worrying about what's the progress going on in the schools in K-12 in the state.
John, perhaps an inappropriate or impossibly general overview question, but are you a bull or bear on Portland? And if you're a bull, what time horizon?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Max Williams at Oregon Community Foundation used to always ask me this question with respect to Oregon, but with respect to Portland. In the next to last conversation I had with the founder of our company, Ed Whitelaw, he died in 2001. We were talking about Portland. He said, John, and he was talking specifically about downtown. He says, as long as the blocks are short and walkable, and you can see Mount Hood on a clear day, this place is going to work. And it's going to take the time to sort of move through and get the civic leadership and the policy to work. So I would say I'm a bull in a 7 to 10 year time frame. Hold.
I have a question.
Hold recommendation before that.
Let's work together and make that work.
These problems are
I have a
not
question.
difficult.
Right. They're solvable.
If you can't pick up trash, I mean, how tough is picking up trash? That's what's scary. So as soon as we get some leadership, it'll be better quickly.
Thank you, John.
Hi, this
All right.
is Ed. I have a question for you.
Ed.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
I just had a quick question. I know there are headlines in the New York Times and other publications about the commercial real estate, being vacancies in major cities, including New York and Washington, D.C., alarming vacancies that it doesn't look that like they're coming back. In other words, post-COVID, particularly young workers who can time shift are and desirous of being in places like I am right now, Lisbon, and working late into the night to be able to sit at a cafe the next morning is not something that we're going to see turn around. As a matter of fact, I think it was maybe one or two of the tech companies that are, in a sense, almost threatening workers to come back to the offices. How does that sort of factor into your projections and thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would agree with everything that you said. We've done projections of downtown Portland's commercial office space, and we would say that the PERS crisis will resolve itself before you see new speculative development of office space in downtown Portland. And both of those timeframes are probably in the late 2030s into the 2040s. So that is a big challenge, and I would say that there's some very limited opportunities for conversion from office to residential. But most of these buildings that are sort of built on full city blocks and have big elevator shafts, a couple of big elevator shafts in the middle, just don't lend themselves very much to attractive places to live. So thankfully, the governor and Dan McMillan from Standard have come forward in a task force to have some focused thinking about what a vision for a next generation of downtown might look like. It's going to have to be built on something different than what it has been in the last generation.
They give you an answer, Ed?
Yeah, thank you so much.
How's Lisbon?
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you again, John. And our meeting is adjourned.